Chapter 1392. As the Taiwan Tao Venerable's technique changed, the light of the great Tao lit up in the void of the spirit sea, and the light streams were added to his body. It was not through the Haotian mirror, but directly added to his body. Not only Lin Feng who was fighting, but even the strong practitioners of the Yudu race, as well as the future star-glazed Buddha master, monkey and the enchantress, who had been watching silently from the sidelines, had their eyes lit up, and their gazes landed on the Taiwan Tao Venerable. The Nine Heavens Imperial Court that the Taiwan Tao Venerable was holding in his palm was originally divided into 9 levels: Middle Heaven, Envy Heaven, Consort Heaven, Gung Heaven, Lai Heaven, Open Heaven, Harmonious Heaven, and Shin Heaven. The 9 Heavens of Completion Heaven. But at this moment, the boundaries of the 9 Heavens Imperial Court gradually became blurry, and an invisible airflow, from bottom to top, completely connected the 9 heavens. This invisible airflow started from the Middle Heaven Gate, passed through the layers of starlight in Envy Heaven, passed through the cracks in the boundaries that split the universe, passed through the layers of golden lightning in Lai Heaven, passed through the majestic immortal city in Open Heaven, passed through the many worlds in Harmonious Heaven, and passed through Shin Heaven's boundless celestial realm and divine kingdom. In this process, this airflow also guided everything that he had experienced: the heavenly gate, starlight, lightning, immortal city, and celestial realm. All existences were wrapped by this airflow and then guided all the way up, continuously ascending, all the way to the 9th level, entering the great void mystic light that was not bright or grand, but was incomparably mysterious, indescribable, and indescribable. But at this step, the airflow still did not stop. Instead, it passed through the great void mystic light, and continued to ascend. This airflow blurred the entire 9 Heavens Imperial Court, turning the 9 Heavens Imperial Court into one, then breaking through the shackles and ascending to the 9 Heavens together. Above the 9 Heavens was an even higher existence, the 10th Heaven Imperial Court, the wondrous realm of above heaven. Reaching this wondrous realm, the light of the great Tao in the spirit sea shook together, as if it was being guided. Even the primordial golden lamp in the giant golden lake below seemed to be shaken at this moment. Under the blessing of the light of the great Tao, that airflow finally had a concrete form, shining brightly. But this airflow was even more mysterious and unpredictable than the great void mystic light of above heaven. It was difficult to describe, as if it was beyond everyone's understanding. It was the most powerful divine power in the history of Taishu Temple, the heavenly secrets of the heavens. Since the ancient times, within the Taishu Temple that produced experts in large numbers, only 3 people were able to cultivate this technique. All 3 of them could be ranked among the 5 strongest cultivators in the history of the human race. The founder of the Taishu Temple, the Taishu Taoist who created this method, Red Emperor Wen Qiyang, the #1 fighter in the history of Taishu Temple, and even the entire human cultivation world. And now, in front of everyone's eyes at his peak, he was the undisputed #1 person in the divine land of the ancient era, the Grand One Supremacy. Tao Lord Taiwan's eyes were still closed, but Lin Feng could feel that there was an invisible gaze staring at him. It was the gaze of Tao Lord Taiwan. As soon as the stream of light appeared, under its illumination, Lin Feng's many figures that were one with time and space actually gradually became unstable. One after another, Tai Chi patterns appeared in the void. At this moment, time seemed to be forced to flow backwards. Even Lin Feng's techniques, divine sense, and magic seemed to flow backwards. Tao Lord Taiwan also stretched out his finger, and led the airflow toward the center of Lin Feng's eyebrows. Wherever the airflow reached, there was a sound in the void. It was not a mournful wail, but a constant cheer. The great Tao of heaven and earth was happy for the appearance of Tao Lord Taiwan's finger. Lin Feng's Qianquan reversal technique, which could restrain the great void mystic light of above heaven, seemed to collapse under this finger. It was difficult to continue. The dark starry sky above his head also returned to peace at this moment. The stars returned to their normal orbit and naturally flowed. The universe was peaceful. Lin Feng looked silently at Tao Lord Taiwan's finger. He had a faint feeling that if he was hit by this finger, not only would his current body be destroyed, but even his original body would be affected. If it was any other spell, this would at most destroy the body. But the art of heaven displayed by Tao Lord Taiwan seemed to be condescending. standing on a higher level to cast the spell. When the finger fell, all related existences would be affected. It seemed that it was just a light tap of the fingertip, but it seemed to lead the entire universe to suppress it. It was no wonder that the Buddha was pressed into Mount Meru by Wuxia. Such a method was indeed the most powerful fighting method in the history of the human clan cultivation world. It gathered the power of the great path of heaven and earth. At this moment, the brilliance of the primordial golden lamp in the spiritual sea had a miraculous effect against the art of heaven. The primordial golden lamp in the giant golden lake below shook involuntarily, but the light of the Haotian mirror also attacked continuously. Lin Feng looked a little more solemn. He put his index fingers together and pointed forward. 2 rays of light, one black and one white, burst forth and intertwined to meet Dao Lord Taiwan's art of heaven. As soon as the eternal light of calamity appeared, Dao Lord Taiwan's condescending power suddenly lightened. The brilliance of the great path in the spiritual sea was also drawn by the eternal light of calamity. The power of the bell of fate and the river of time was added to the eternal light of calamity, making it more mysterious and magnificent. Even the 9 heavens, which led the creation, was no match for the changes of creation and destruction at this moment. Under the scouring of the eternal light of calamity, the light condensed by the art of heaven at Dao Lord Taiwan's fingertip was gradually worn down. Seeing this scene, the future star-glazed Buddha master, who had been watching silently from the side, smiled slightly. In the end, the foundation of the great path has been damaged. Otherwise, under the art of heaven, anyone who has not reached the middle or complete tribulation stage would be knocked down by a realm. Seeing the power of the eternal light of calamity, Dao Lord Taiwan's expression did not change in the slightest. Even though he could fight or even defeat a great demon in the Dharma-ending realm with his art of heaven alone, at this moment he could only sigh. Suddenly, Dao Lord Taiwan's body lit up with a brilliance that looked like crystal fragments, instantly setting up a layer of protection in front of him. Being shrouded by this layer of light, Dao Lord Taiwan suddenly seemed to have stepped into a realm without calamities and tribulations. He was untouched by all magic, untouched by all evil, untouched by darkness, and untouched by murderous tribulations. At the same time, the power of the art of heaven was wearing down the eternal light of calamity. At this time, when the eternal light of calamity fell on Dao Lord Taiwan's body, it was immediately blocked by the mysterious light curtain. The mysterious light curtain seemed to be formed by crystal fragments. Each crystal fragment was engraved with a profound rune, and each rune was formed by countless even smaller runes. They stretched across the void and connected together, making Dao Lord Taiwan feel as if he was not in this world. Each crystal fragment was like a world, and each rune seemed to have a god sitting within it, singing the great Tao of the heavens. The power contained in this brilliance was something that Lin Feng was very familiar with. It was the power of the creation divine light. This was the creation divine light that belonged to Dao Lord Taiwan. It was called the calamity divine light, and its brilliance was endless. In the past, it was because of the protection of the Haotian mirror, the creation divine light, and the existence of the great void yin-yang formation that Dao Lord Taiwan could survive the attack of the great demon in the Yuhuang heavenly sea. But now, the calamity divine light showed its miraculous power once again, helping Dao Lord Taiwan resist Lin Feng's eternal light of calamity. Heaven's secret art of the heavens, divine light of tribulation, one offensive and one defensive complemented each other, together creating the strength of the greater one Dao Lord, allowing him to survive under the attack of Lin Feng's eternal light of tribulation imbued with the power of the river of time. Although he was protected by the calamity divine light, Dao Lord Taiwan's figure was still forced back by the mysterious brilliance. Lin Feng stood in the void and looked at Dao Lord Taiwan. He nodded. Your reputation is well deserved. Dao Lord Taiwan sighed. Sect Master Lin is too humble. In order to maintain this body, you have to use your innate techniques to fight. You can't maintain your strength for long. If this was your real body, I might not be able to withstand this attack. Not to mention this is just your fake body. Lin Feng smiled faintly. You don't have to be so polite, Dao Lord Taiwan. The current you can't be compared to when you were at your peak. You and I aren't fighting and learning from each other. We are fighting for the spirit sea. Let's just use our own methods. He activated the primordial golden lamp to give off another beam of golden brilliance to fight against the Haotian mirror's mirror light. He then said unhurriedly, "I have the time I want. Next, it will depend on the methods of Dao friends." As he said that, Lin Feng landed on the primordial golden lamp below. On the other side, his real body that was fighting with Mirage Sun and Yudu had also abandoned it. He brought Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the rest down. Hearing Lin Feng's words, everyone's expression turned apprehensive. They carefully observed the huge golden lake below, and saw that even though the golden liquid in the primordial golden lamp had been exhausted, there seemed to be a whirlpool in the center of the lake. In the whirlpool, the primordial golden lamp grew bigger and supported Lin Feng and the rest. It then sank down into the whirlpool. Seeing this, not only the Yudu clan and the Taishu temple, even the heavenly enchantment great sage, and the monkey who had been watching from the sidelines all pounced towards Lin Feng and the others. Lin Feng smiled leisurely, and his real body sat cross-legged in the center of the primordial golden lamp. He closed his eyes as though he was meditating. At this moment, the body formed by the three avatars slowly raised a huge black umbrella. On the surface of the black umbrella, there were many dirty and moldy places. It looked extremely dilapidated, but Lin Feng gently tapped with his finger, and a small black pagoda flew out to land in the center of the black umbrella. The black pagoda shrunk continuously and attached to the black umbrella like the tip of the umbrella. Lin Feng spun the black umbrella, and the primordial golden lamp pulled a large amount of golden lake water up to land on the surface of the umbrella. Rays of light poured out from the small black pagoda and flowed on the surface of the umbrella along with the golden lake water. The dirty and moldy spots on the surface of the black umbrella instantly vanished. Lin Feng raised the umbrella, and in the next instant, all kinds of violent attacks landed on the surface of the umbrella. However, the umbrella and the small black pagoda flowed with layers of light, and instantly transformed into an eternal night that seemed to cover the sky, isolating all the attacks from the world. One umbrella covering the sky, indestructible. This treasure is now the true heaven-covering umbrella. Lin Feng sat leisurely under the umbrella, and looked at Grand One Venerable with a smile. This umbrella of mine is probably more worthy of being called indestructible than your calamity-resolving divine light. Chapter 1393. Lin Feng's true body sat in the center of the primordial golden lamp with his eyes closed. Streams of light gathered towards the primordial golden lamp from all directions. Then the primordial golden lamp connected with Lin Feng, causing his entire body to be overflowing with colors. Rays of the great Tao hung down from his body like ribbons, looking abnormally mysterious. This scene landed in everyone's eyes, and their gazes froze. They could clearly feel the radiance of the great Tao in the spirit sea trembling continuously. At that moment, Lin Feng had already started to refine his spirit sea through the huge golden lake in front of him. Seeing Lin Feng's body sink into the lake along with the primordial golden lamp, Sun Mirage Yuda's gaze turned cold. He waved his claw, and the broken horn that had forced back the heavenly turtle golden bead also fell into the lake. The golden lake that was covered in black god markings, and infected by Sun Mirage Yuda's demon power consciousness, contained the broken horn that came from the Yuhuang celestial sea. Instantly, layers of purple light shone from within. A whirlpool also formed in the lake, and it pressed towards the center of the lake where the primordial golden lamp was. Everyone in Taishu Temple was high up in the Nine Heavens Imperial Court, and they also formed a spell. The Haotian mirror in the sky split off a faint mirror light, and it shone towards the white clouds in front of them, which was the surface of the lake that they occupied. The corner of the huge golden lake that was shrouded by the white clouds also formed a huge whirlpool, and it pressed towards the center of the lake. At that moment, the monkey and the enchantress, who had been watching by the side, also performed their own spells. In the lake that their demon power and consciousness occupied, they each produced a smaller whirlpool, and they also pressed towards the direction of the primordial golden lamp. Although the primordial golden lamp still occupied the center of the lake, it couldn't continue to sink with the whirlpool, and it was temporarily fixed in the middle of the water. Lin Feng's expression didn't change at all. His true body still seemed to be meditating, and rays of light flowed continuously on his body. The body formed by his 3 clones held the heaven-shrouding umbrella in one hand, and an indescribable spell in the other. It stood in front of him with a smile that was yet not a smile. It looked leisurely at Tao Lord Tai, Mirage Sun Yudu, and the rest. Sun Mirage Yudu revealed his true form, and stood in the void like a mountain. He looked down at Lin Feng, and the primordial golden lamp who were in the heart of the lake, and let out a long howl. As he roared, countless divine patterns flickered on the horn on top of his head, and a spot of black brilliance spread out from between his eyebrows, turning into a dazzling and vast black profound light that struck down towards Lin Feng. From the moment the black mystic light appeared, the radiance of the great path in the spirit sea let out ear-piercing wails and became chaotic, as if it couldn't bear the heavy burden. The water in the giant golden lake also kept surging. It was as if it transcended space and time, ignoring the flow of time and the distance between them. The moment the black profound light appeared, it had already arrived before Lin Feng. It was none other than Yudu Xianhua of Yudu. The black brilliance that seemed to be able to destroy heaven and earth shook the entire spirit sea. However, the heaven-covering umbrella in Lin Feng's hands had layers of brilliance surging out from the small black pagoda on the top of the umbrella. It merged with the pitch-black surface of the umbrella, and formed a hazy and chaotic world. Countless air currents could be seen spiraling in this world. And they seemed to only be long and wide, not thick or thin. They continued to extend in all directions, causing the top and bottom of the umbrella to become 2 completely separated worlds. They couldn't interfere with each other. When the extremely terrifying black profound light landed in this world, it was instantly worn down by the layers of air currents. It was as if rain had landed on the surface of the umbrella, scattering in all directions and disappearing. Sun Mirage Yuda's pupils contracted slightly as he stared at Lin Feng's heaven-covering umbrella. He didn't speak for a long time. The battle of the spirit sea was of great importance, so he naturally didn't have the mood to fight with Lin Feng. Seeing Lin Feng using the heaven-covering umbrella to protect himself, he knew that the defense of this treasure wasn't ordinary. To save time, Sun Mirage Yudu naturally wouldn't specifically attack the heaven-covering umbrella. However, the laws of the great Tao under the heaven-covering umbrella seemed to be completely different from the outside world. His Yudu profound flower naturally landed on the surface of the umbrella. As long as the umbrella didn't break, the person under the umbrella could avoid all calamities and not be touched by all techniques. Taiwan Venerable looked at this scene and also frowned slightly. With a turn of his body, he had already returned to the 9 heavens of the Great Void Celestial Gates. He didn't say much and put his palms together. Rays of brilliance rose from the 9 heavens of the Great Void Celestial Gates and landed in the Haotian mirror in the sky. Ribbons of light flew around the Haotian mirror and connected with the void. They extended into the space-time of the spirit sea and triggered the singing of the great Tao. As the mirror light condensed, in the center of the treasure mirror, a colorless and formless divine light that was as thin as a strand of hair swept up the radiance of the great Tao in the spirit sea and shot towards Lin Feng. This extremely condensed mirror light shot into the primal chaos domain. It was as if it was lighting up the primal chaos and opening up a new world. However, the aura of chaos flowed and continued to drown out the light, causing everything to return to chaos. There was no light, no darkness. Time stopped and space didn't exist. There was no coldness or heat. Everything was in a blur. The enchantress's eyes were as bright as the stars, but he didn't act rashly. He only looked at the heaven-covering umbrella silently. At the same time, he drove the golden lake water that he had refined and occupied to form a whirlpool to stop the sinking of the primordial golden lamp. At this time, the eyes of the future star-glazed Buddha master gradually lit up. Starlight flashed in the palms of his 48,000 arms. He didn't execute the powerful divine art of the Vairocana divine palm mudra. Instead, his 48,000 arms formed the same mudra. The mudra was extremely simple, ancient yet profound. It was like the source of all things, the origin of all things, the beginning of all mysteries. It was the immovable venerable's hidden fundamental mudra of all techniques. As soon as the mudra appeared, the void where the future star-glazed Buddha master was seemed to step into primordial chaos. He couldn't see the past or the future. Karma and clues gathered in the void. Countless nodes and threads gathered on the body of the future star-glazed Buddha Master. It was like he was the source of everything. The karma threads were scattered in the void. They seemed illusory and solid at the same time. They spread towards the golden lake and landed on the heaven-covering umbrella. The threads stirred in the chaos, causing the chaotic world to gradually change. It was like a flat surface that was becoming three-dimensional. Although he wasn't using his own Buddhist divine arts, the profound concept of power still made everyone's hearts tremble. At this moment, the future star-glazed Buddha Master was almost at the middle tribulation or completion stage of the current Buddha. Lin Feng, who was under the heaven-covering umbrella, smiled when he saw this. He wasn't surprised at all. The black pagoda at the top of the heaven-covering umbrella was shining brighter and brighter. From the top of the pagoda, ribbons of light fell down and fell into the world above the umbrella. The karma threads triggered by the future star-glazed Buddha Master were also breaking apart in the chaotic world. The monkey looked at this scene and scratched his ears and cheeks. He shouted, "Master of the Mystic Gate, let me try your treasured umbrella." As he spoke, he had already revealed his true form. His body expanded and his crimson eyes were like two great suns that looked down on the world. Behind him, a white-furred, blue-eyed divine monkey appeared. With a leap, his body seemed to surpass the heavens and the earth. He transformed into 3 heads and 6 arms. 3 divine iron rods smashed down on the heaven-covering umbrella. As the acupoints of the golden-furred monkey opened and closed, layers of starlight appeared. Bright stars revolved around his body, constantly rising and falling. It was like a dazzling starry sky. The giant monkey's body pierced through the void. The 3 rods merged into one and smashed down together. That momentum seemed to be able to destroy the galaxy. In the midst of the endless chaos, a dark spot instantly appeared. It was like a black hole. Then it kept expanding, as if the universe was opening up. However, even more chaotic air currents kept surging into it, filling up the broken black hole. The darkness disappeared completely. Not only can it defend against spells, but it can also defend against the power of the corporeal body? Everyone thought about it, but they didn't slow down. Sun Mirage Yudu gave a long howl, and the power of Yudu profound flower at the heart of his brows grew stronger. In the black profound light, starlight also appeared, transforming into a dazzling galaxy. It fused with the black light like the stars in the night sky. The mournful wails of the great Tao in the spirit sea became softer, and the radiance of the great Tao became more dazzling. Sun Mirage Yudu even felt that the spirit sea was rejecting him. However, he didn't hesitate. He released his sacrificial stars and raised his demon power to the extreme. He executed the black profound light to attack Lin Feng. However, the terrifying brilliance that was like a galaxy pouring down landed on the chaotic world above the heaven-covering umbrella. Although it stirred up the chaotic air currents, it still couldn't break through. Beside him, Shixing Yudu and Jingyan Yudu executed their own demon power and divine arts to attack the heaven-covering umbrella. In the 9 heavens of the Great Void Palace, Dao Venerable Tai was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Try again." Lin Daohan, Shoichi Dashin, Dao Venerable Xianwan, and the others nodded. The 9 heavens of the Great Void Palace rose up, and a huge illusory ball of light engulfed the Haotian mirror. Then, the resplendent brilliance swayed continuously, activating the great Tao of the Spirit Sea. An extremely majestic pillar of light shot out from within, and shot towards Lin Feng. Under the illumination of that light, everything else seemed to lose its color. What entered one's eyes was only endless brilliance. In that ray of brilliance, one could see the creation of heaven and earth and the changes of creation. It was as if it was explaining the history of the world from its creation to the present. The brilliance directly tore a clear crack in the layers of chaos on the heaven-covering umbrella. Once the crack appeared, even the indestructible power concept of the heaven-covering umbrella seemed to waver. However, the aura of chaos continued to circulate, quickly mending the crack and restoring everything to its original state. The various divine arts of Sun Paragon Yudu, the monkey, and the future star-glazed Buddha Master all landed on the heaven-covering umbrella. Although the chaos kept shattering, they still couldn't break through the seemingly indestructible black umbrella. All the attacks seemed to land on the black umbrella at the same time, but they seemed to be separated into different universes of chaos. They couldn't form a combined force, and only the chaos could be seen. Faced with this situation, everyone fell silent. Their hearts sank as they looked at Lin Feng, who was sitting cross-legged under the umbrella. Chapter 1394. Seeing that none of the attacks could break through the protection of heaven-covering umbrella, everyone fell silent. Phantom Son Yuda's expression was cold, and there was a murderous glint in his eyes. In the 9 heavens of the Great Void Imperial Court, Lord Tai and the rest were deep in thought. The monkey scratched his ears and cheeks, his eyes blinking continuously. His expression was one of excitement and anxiety. The enchantress's eyes narrowed into slits, flashing with an indecipherable glow. In the eyes of future star-glazed Buddha Master, there were also rays of light flashing. If there isn't a single attack, once it exceeds a certain limit, no matter how many attacks there are, it's useless. As his gaze moved, he looked at the 9 heavens of the Great Void Imperial Court and the Haotian Mirror. If the Haotian Mirror was in its perfect state, it might have been able to make heaven-covering umbrella feel some pressure. With the Haotian Mirror suppressing the chaotic air currents on the surface of heaven-covering umbrella, the attacks of the others would have a chance to break through the defense of the umbrella and land in the world under it. Lin Feng and the rest would then be able to escape from the situation where they would never fall. In the 9 heavens of the Great Void Imperial Court, Lord Tai, Shoichi Dashin, Lord Xianwan, and Lin Daohan had already understood the crux of the matter. Slowly Shoichi Dashin said, "In this situation, let's use the second plan. Although the strangeness of the master of Xianmen's strange golden plate is unexpected, it has increased the success rate of the second plan from less than 50% to more than 90%. If we continue to delay, the situation will become worse. Although the master of Xianmen and his strange golden plate are fixed and can't continue to sink, he is still refining the spirit sea. In the long run, if we are unable to break through the defense of his treasured umbrella, we can only watch helplessly as he refines the spirit sea. When he truly controls the spirit sea, all the resources in our hands will be devoured by him in an instant." Hearing this, Lin Daohan nodded and said, "Let's do it. We don't know when the divine land will be able to succeed, or if it will be done in time. Although we will lose our current control over the spiritual sea, if we succeed, we will be able to fight again. At the very least, we can prevent the spiritual sea from falling into the hands of others. Now that we're using the second plan, we'll also have the master of Xian sect to draw the attention of Yudu race, and that 10,000 law heart ape, so that they won't take advantage of us." Dao Lord Xian looked at Sun Mirage Yudu, future constellation glazed Buddha Master, Monkey and the Enchantress. He said softly, "The methods of the Master of Profound Gate are beyond imagination, but the impact on others is within our expectations. He has also created an external environment for the implementation of the second plan." Tai Daoist Lord, who had been silent all this while, said, "We still have to be vigilant. Although no one wants to see the spirit sea fall into the hands of the master of the celestial sect of wonders, it is a rare opportunity for them to seize or destroy the Haotian Mirror." The other big shots of Taishu Temple nodded in unison. Then, Dao Lord Xian formed a spell with his left hand and gently tapped the Haotian Mirror with the finger of his right hand. Lin Daohan stretched out his left hand, and on the back of it, a great void engraving shone brightly. Rays of brilliance flowed around it. His right hand also stretched out his index finger and pointed at the Haotian Mirror. The Haotian Mirror, which was like the center of the universe, trembled slightly. Then, it transformed into a bright mirror light and fell into the huge golden lake in front of it. Sun Mirage Yudu, Monkey, and the Enchantress looked at this scene, and their eyes narrowed into slits. They revealed a pondering expression. Future constellation glazed Buddha Master saw this and smiled. He didn't say a word and simply closed his eyes. He didn't move or speak, nor did he reveal any aura around him. He sank back into the state of nirvanic death, as if he didn't care about anything that was happening in the outside world. Lin Feng, who was under the heaven-covering umbrella, looked at this scene, his gaze lightly flashing. He nodded his head without saying a word, saying in his heart, "The clue that was faintly discernible before really did land here." At this moment, in the huge lake, The Golden Lake water surged nonstop. It was shrouded by purple clouds, white clouds, black radiance, golden radiance, and layers of dark clouds, forming 5 huge whirlpools. The other 4 whirlpools squeezed the largest whirlpool occupied by Lin Feng in the center. For a moment, they were in a stalemate. Meanwhile, the Haotian mirror had sunk into the whirlpool shrouded by the white clouds. The bright mirror light shone in all directions in the water. Ribbons of light extended out and connected with the radiance of the great Tao in the huge golden lake. Then, they continued to stretch out in all directions in the vast world of the spirit sea. In the void, the singing of the great Tao rang out incessantly. The flowing light didn't need to pulsate, and rays of light spread out in all directions without end. In the world of the spirit sea, there seemed to be a huge magic formation. Slowly, it turned, and from it came a mysterious and profound power. The radiance of the great Tao seemed to lead to the outside of the spirit sea, connecting to the outside world. This bizarre scene made everyone raise their eyebrows. The great Tao of the spirit sea had returned to its original form, sealing the inside and outside, but at this moment, the radiance seemed to be connected to the entire great Tianyuan world. It didn't reveal any terrifying power, but the concept was deep and profound. This is something that only the Haotian mirror can do. It is a treasure born from the great Tianyuan world, an existence like the sun of the great Kiliacosm. Lin Feng nodded slightly, looking at the mirror light sinking into the lake. At this moment, the Haotian mirror's action did not cause any obstruction to the communication between Lin Feng and the spirit sea. On the contrary, on the surface of the huge golden lake near the Taishu temple, the floating white clouds gradually subsided and disappeared. In the center of the huge lake, Lin Feng, who was directly connected to the great Tao of the spirit sea, could feel that the communication between him and the spirit sea had become more convenient. The area that was occupied by the Taishu temple was gradually being taken over by Lin Feng and the primordial golden lamp. However, Lin Feng did not feel very happy. At this moment, his attention was on the mirror light that was sinking into the water. He could clearly feel that the aura of the mirror was becoming stronger and stronger. After the battle earlier, the Haotian mirror had actually been recovering for a long time. In its current state, it could not break through the umbrella with a full blow. The aura of the Haotian mirror was even showing signs of decreasing compared to the beginning. But at this moment, the Haotian mirror in the Golden Lake was clearly growing rapidly, climbing towards its peak state step by step. The attention of the Yudu strong practitioners, Monkey, and the enchantress all shifted from Lin Feng to the bright mirror light. Everyone's expression was slightly complicated. Other than Monkey, who was slightly restless, everyone else was silent. Their gazes moved back and forth between the people of the Taishu temple and the Haotian mirror, as well as between Lin Feng and the heaven-covering umbrella. However, no one did anything else. The attacks against the heaven-covering umbrella all stopped. The world-shaking battle that had been raging just a moment ago stopped in an instant. Instead, it fell into a strange silence. Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, Yu Hongyan, Yang Qing, and White Tiger Great Sage were all staring at the Haotian mirror at this moment. Yang Qing asked suspiciously, "The Haotian mirror can actually use such a method to speed up its own recovery? Why has there never been a similar situation in the past? Mr. Miao has never mentioned it either." Zhu Yi's eyes flashed with the talismans of change, and he didn't say a word. Wang Lin, who was beside him, was also in deep thought. Lin Feng's indifferent voice rang out at this moment. It's not that Shihao didn't want to mention it, but he also didn't expect such a change. This is the first time in the history of Taishu Temple. Such a chance can only be chanced upon. The last time they entered the Spirit Sea, it was also difficult for them to execute this skill. Even now, the chance of success is less than 50%. The success of the skill they executed now is actually all thanks to my primordial golden cup. The heavenly Tao is constant, and there are pros and cons at that moment. There was a rare look of hesitation on Mirage Sun Yuda's face, which was usually calm and composed. There was even a faint flash of impatience and fury in his eyes. The battle of the Spirit Sea had blurred the differences between races and past grudges, but no one could guarantee that everything was absolute. The current situation was no doubt that Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple were competing in speed, But to Yudu race, it wasn't good news. If both sides continued to oppose each other, it would be fine. Otherwise, everyone present would undoubtedly face a disaster. But now, the hope of breaking heaven-covering umbrella was placed on the Haotian mirror. This made Mirage Sun Yudu and the Enchantress hesitate for a moment. They didn't dare to act rashly. This kind of situation where they couldn't control naturally made Mirage Sun Yudu and the strong practitioners of Yudu race frown. Looking at the Haotian mirror whose aura was gradually rising, everyone sank into a dilemma for a moment. To Yudu race, this treasure mirror had given them an abnormally deep impression in the past. No matter if it was Mirage Sun Yudu or Jingyan Yudu, they all wanted nothing more than to get rid of the Haotian mirror. But now, even though they clearly had the power to stop it, they could only suppress it and watch as the treasure returned to its peak. The complicated feelings of all the great demons were hard to describe with words. However, from the conversation between Lin Feng and Lord Tai, no matter if it was Mirage Sun Yudu or the Enchantress, they could all hear that Taishu Temple definitely couldn't accept the Spirit Sea falling into the hands of Xianmen Tianzong. And the Haotian mirror in its perfect state might not be able to break through the protection of heaven-covering umbrella. To stop Lin Feng from refining the Spirit Sea, Taishu Temple most likely couldn't do it alone. Furthermore, other than heaven-covering umbrella, there was still that exceptional heaven-punishing sword in the Spirit Sea. It was just that in this battle of the Spirit Sea, Lin Feng's figure became more and more mysterious in everyone's eyes, and it was hard to predict. Not to mention Mirage Sun Yudu, the Enchantress, and the rest, even the seemingly calm future star-glazed Buddha master closed her eyes and didn't care about the outside world. But the image of heaven-covering umbrella still flashed in her mind. In the 9 heavens of the Great Void Palace, Lord Tai and the rest looked solemnly at the Haotian mirror in the lake. In the vast Spirit Sea, it was quiet. All the restless auras had calmed down, and only the light of the great Tao continued to shine. Chapter 1395. The situation in the Spirit Sea fell into a strange state of calmness and stalemate. After the initial calmness, there was a raging storm. The raging storm calmed down in the blink of an eye. Future star-glazed Buddha Lord, Sun Mirage, Yudu Monkey the Enchantress, and the others silently looked at the giant golden lake in front of them. At Lin Feng, who was sitting on the primordial golden lamp with heaven-covering umbrella, and at the Haotian mirror that had sunk into the water. At that moment, everyone seemed to be waiting patiently. As time passed, the stalemate became more intense. The Spirit Sea was turbulent. The colossal world was not calm either. Due to the war between the two worlds, there was a rather vast area on infinite wilderness land that was occupied by the human cultivation world. They used various treasures and spirit formations to change the spirit chi flow of the area, transforming it into a paradise suitable for human cultivators to cultivate and live in. The area near the entrance of the realm passageway that connected the two worlds was naturally occupied by human cultivators. However, there was a storm brewing on infinite wilderness land at that moment. The two pillars of the human cultivation world, the Celestial Sect of Wonders and the Void Temple, their respective top experts, including the master of the Celestial Sect of Wonders Lin Feng, who makes demons tremble in fear, will all be heading to the Spirit Sea this time to participate in the competition. The departure of these two great forces caused the human cultivation world to be empty. Affected by this, the monster clan seemed to be a bit restless. Although they weren't sure when Xianmen Tianzong and the top experts of Taishu Temple would leave the colossal world, and although Lin Feng had left behind the heaven-punishing sword, the demons still had some thoughts. The human cultivation world was also on guard as if they were facing a great enemy, although it was not to the extent that they would shrink their defense with all their might out of guilt. Some peripheral areas were also temporarily abandoned. Some of the relatively weaker sects and forces simply returned to the vast land of the Divine Land, to avoid being unable to respond in time when a major change really occurred. The situation on the border between Infinite Wilderness Land and the southern border of the Divine Land was relatively calm. This was because it was the residence of Xianmen Tianzong, the seventh disciple of the mystic Gate Master, Huang Tian Emperor Shi Tianhao. Moreover, unlike Yindi City, which was closer to the territory controlled by the demons, Shi Tianhao himself was in the desolate heaven residence at the moment. Putting aside the fact that he was Lin Feng's direct disciple, and that Xianli was also in the vast thousand world, just Shi Tianhao's own cultivation level was enough to make the great demons act cautiously. Back in the void battlefield, the result of the battle between Shi Tianhao and the dragon tribe was intentionally or unintentionally spread by Shi Zhongmao, the great Qin dynasty's ghost Sun King, who was watching from the side. Now everyone in the heaven primordial world knew that His Excellency Huang Celestial Emperor, who was in the spirit refinement and void returning realm, could compete with the Dharma-ending realm experts in terms of divine powers. Shi Tianhao, who inherited the Sky City and the remains of the blue sky array left by the ancient heavenly gate, could even fight against the demons of the end realm. In addition to Shi Tianhao, Yindi Xiaoyan, a disciple of the mystic gate master and the first disciple of the sect master, had also appeared in Yindi City for a short time. Xiaoyan, who could activate the power of the Nether Sea, could cause great damage if he didn't care about the territory. The mystic gate master was full of talents, especially Xiaoyan, Zhu Yi, Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao, who were known as the four heroes of the mystic gate, were even more outstanding. In a short time, they had grown to the extent of dominating the Heaven Yuan realm. With the two of them in charge, the demons on Infinite Wilderness Land were still restrained, although they were eager to make trouble. The demon race was also worried that they would be ambushed by the human race cultivators, and the terrifying Sky Destroyer sword that hung above everyone's heads. The tense atmosphere lasted for a long time. However, as time passed, both the human race experts and the demon race demons vaguely felt that the aura of heaven and earth seemed to be changing. Be it Infinite Wilderness Land or the Divine Land, space-time would often undergo strange changes. It would suddenly distort and then return to normal in the blink of an eye. The direction of the spirit chi meridians also seemed rather strange, as if they were disturbed by some external existence. The disturbance did not originate from the vast thousand domains itself, but from outside the realm. This change was not limited to a corner, but seemed to be everywhere. The Battle of the Spirit Sea was the top event in recent years. Everyone was paying attention to it. Even if they did not have enough strength or opportunities to participate, they still worked hard to collect relevant information so that they could control the situation and help themselves survive this major tribulation. The Spirit Sea seemed to be everywhere and closely related to the vast thousand domains. Its existence could not be felt, but in fact, it perfectly overlapped with every space-time in the vast thousand domains. This characteristic appeared in everyone's mind immediately. Comparing it with the changes in front of them, they immediately understood. It was the changes in the Spirit Sea that affected the vast thousand domains that everyone was in. And such a drastic change even affected the vast thousand domains, so the conflict in the Spirit Sea would be extremely intense. It was different from the one-sided struggle between the Yuhuang Heavenly Sea and the Spirit Sea in the past, or the actions of Lin Feng, Taishu Temple, and the Yudu race when the three clans tore open the gap in the Spirit Sea again. The changes at this moment originated from within the Spirit Sea. The experts of different forces were fighting and shaking the Spirit Sea, but they were carefully maintaining it to prevent tearing open the gap again, and causing everyone to be repelled by the Spirit Sea. Such a movement in the Spirit Sea world did not feel anything, but if seen from the outside, the entire Spirit Sea itself was like waves that were constantly fluctuating. The fluctuations were not violent, but they continued for a long time. After realizing this, everyone in the Great Thousand World gradually understood that there must be a fierce battle between the top experts in the spiritual sea. In particular, the fluctuations showed signs of becoming more and more intense. Affected by this, the tense situation in the vast thousand domains gradually changed. On the vast continent of Infinite Wasteland, at the extreme border between the territories of the human race and the territories of the demon race, stood a majestic city, constructed from the remodeling of an entire spirit mountain. On the cliff at the side of the mountain city, the three large words Flame Emperor City were written. It was precisely the residence that belonged to the Flame Emperor Xiaoyan. At this moment, within Yin Emperor City, Xiaoyan himself was not present. His Fun Tianya's first seat disciple, Dao Master Vast Sky Tangjun, was also present at Fun Tianya's cave dwelling in Jade Capital Mountain. The person guarding here was the third-generation first seat of Fun Tianya's direct disciple, perfected Lord Yuanmi, Duanmu Hong. However, Duanmu Hong was mainly in charge of daily affairs. The strongest expert guarding Flame Emperor City was the Mahayana-level treasure that guarded Funtianya's lineage, the Dragon God Heavenly Armor. At this moment, Flame Emperor City had been built quite majestically. In a side hall beside the central hall, a majestic-looking middle-aged man was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed. Silently, he was regulating his breathing. Dragon scales could be vaguely seen on this middle-aged man's exposed skin. Although he was wearing an ordinary robe, he exuded an indestructible aura. This man was the treasure spirit of the Dragon God Heavenly Armor, Long Shinka. He had manifested his body and was cultivating silently in Flame Emperor City. Although the flow of spirit qi here was not as good as in Funtianya on Mount Yujing, it was still extraordinary after years of renovation. Although Long Shinka was cultivating here, he was also paying attention to the situation in the vast thousand domains. He was guarding Flame Emperor City, and naturally understood the current situation. Being at the frontier between the human territory and the demon territory, Flame Emperor City was in a very sensitive and special position. If the demon race wanted to launch a probing attack, then Flame Emperor City was undoubtedly a very good choice. According to Xianmen Tianzong's reaction, they could figure out the truth and the situation inside the Divine Land. Long Shinka reacted quickly. He stood up and walked out of the side hall. His gaze pierced through the void and looked into the distant horizon. Opposite him was the territory controlled by the demon race. Long Shinka stood with his hands behind his back. The aura on his body gradually rose and became hotter. It even gradually caused the temperature of the entire Flame Emperor City to rise. His ordinary robe disappeared and was replaced by his real body, the Dragon God Heavenly Armor. Other than the helmet, Long Shinka's entire body was covered in heavy armor. Apart from his indestructible aura, he also exuded a ferocious power that was full of aggressiveness. Long Shinka stood there like a real dragon, causing the wind and clouds to change color. A gentle youth wearing a purple robe embroidered with a Tai Chi pattern, and a flame symbol appeared behind him. This youth didn't look as bold and unrestrained as the other disciples of Fun Tianya's faction. He didn't look like a blazing flame, but he gave off a warm feeling like fire. He was Duanmu Hong. Duanmu Hong bowed to Long Shinka and said, "Senior, were the spirit qi pulsations and spatial distortions caused by the spirit sea?" He was very respectful to Long Shinka, not only because Long Shinka was a Mahayana-grade Dharma treasure, which was equivalent to a Tao integration realm almighty, but also because he was a Dharma treasure personally refined by the profound sex patriarch, Lin Feng. It was also the earliest Dharma treasure that Xianmen Tianzong knew of. Before bestowing it to Fun Tianya's faction, the Dragon God Heavenly Armor had always been with Lin Feng's war god clone. To Lin Feng, it was also a Dharma treasure that had been with him for a long time. Long Shinka didn't turn around. His gaze was still fixed on the void in the distance. He said, "It's most likely correct. Has this junior disciple returned to the main sect in the Divine Land?" Duanmu Hong answered, "Yes, all disciples below the Yuanying stage have returned to the Yujing Mountain in the Divine Land." Long Shinka nodded. "That's good. Next, let's see if the demon race will come to invade." As he spoke, he suddenly frowned. His gaze became intense as he looked into the distance. There, the sky suddenly darkened. Under the shroud of a towering demon qi, the sunlight also became dim. The shocking aura was pointing toward Yin Emperor City. Chapter 1396. Long Shinka looked at the overflowing demonic aura and frowned slightly. "They're here." The demonic power was unbridled and shocking. Duanmu Hong quickly sensed its presence, but he didn't panic. "This demonic power, it feels like the ancient devil ape race?" Long Shinka nodded. "That's right, it's the demonic power of the ancient devil ape race. However, they're still testing us. If they really wanted to launch a surprise attack, they wouldn't have done so. Now that they were spreading out their demonic power, it looked like they were challenging them." Duanmu Hong said in a low voice, "The primordial demonic ape clan will not easily provoke our sect. Even if they want to test us, they will test the other sects and forces in the vast land of the Divine Prefecture. According to the analysis of Grandmaster and the others, If the primordial demonic ape clan takes the lead, it means that the demon clan is likely to have a limited temporary alliance. As for the strong practitioners of the dragon race, especially Yuan Dragon King, they probably haven't entered the Spirit Sea yet. They want to stir up trouble in the Divine Land first. Xianmen Tianzong, Taishu Temple, and the Yudu race had all entered the Spirit Sea. Few people in the Great Thousand Worlds could restrict the dragon race. However, Lin Feng left Heaven Punishing Sword in the Great Thousand Worlds. Even Yuan Dragon King would tremble in fear. However, looking at it from another angle, Yuan Dragon King's existence also hindered Xianli's path. Without Xianli, Yuan Dragon King would be unstoppable when he stepped into the Divine Land. Xianli staying in the Divine Land was mainly to guard against Yuan Dragon King. If the other great demons of the Age of Cultivation Decline attacked, the human cultivation world would still have some room to maneuver. The strong powers could still resist, and with proper planning, they could even gather their superior forces to encircle and annihilate them. With the dragon race bearing the most pressure, the other demon races would be much more relaxed. In exchange, they naturally had to do something. Long Shenke said, the ancient devil ape race might not have gotten the secret key to the Spirit Sea. However, if that's the case, Mount Shu Sword Sect will be under a lot of pressure. The current Mount Shu Sword Sect, in addition to their mortal enemy, the primordial demon ape clan, was also hated by the dragon clan. In the previous war between the two worlds, Sword Venerable Heavenly Dipper of Mount Shu had rushed to the rescue of Tianhuang mainland and fought alongside the previous emperor of the Great Qin dynasty, Stonefeather, and the son of Xianmen Tianzong, Zhu Yi, against the experts of the dragon race. In the end, Stonefeather died, while Sword Venerable Big Dipper and Zhu Yi joined forces to kill the Blue Sky Dragon King. In the same battle, Xianmen Tianzong Ez, Zhu Yi, and immortal Wu Yu Hongyan killed a large number of great demons of the dragon race, causing both sides to have a deep hatred for each other. However, even though Xianmen Tianzong was relatively empty, the dragon tribe would not easily invade with Xianli around. To the dragon tribe, the Great Qin dynasty and Shi Xingyun were better targets. As for the Mount Shu Sword Sect, even though they were relatively weaker, they could still be attacked. In particular, if the two great demons of the primordial demon ape race, the omnipotent sage and the great sage of Zhuyan, came to Shu Mountain together, then if the experts of the dragon tribe interfered, the pressure on the Shu Mountain Sword Sect would be extraordinary. Duan Muhang understood this as well and answered, I've already communicated with my fellow Taoists from the Mount Shu Sword Sect. They should be prepared, and 7th Grand Uncle has already reported. Long Shenke nodded wordlessly. It was true that the Huang Tian Celestial Arch, Shi Tianhao, was also in the vast Tianhuang mainland, but since the other party had decided to take action, there must be a great demon expert watching over Shi Tianhao. Demonic aura swayed in the distance, and billowing black smoke covered the sky above Yan Emperor City. Within the black smoke, light suddenly shone. 6 light spots grew bigger and bigger. In the end, they were like 6 stars shining brightly, shining through the thick black smoke and illuminating the Yan Emperor City below. Long Shenke and Duan Muhang frowned slightly. Of the 6 light spots, 2 were red, 2 were blue, and 2 were purple. They were clearly the eyes of 3 demons. Within the black smoke, 3 figures appeared. The one in the lead was a completely pitch-black giant ape with crimson-red eyes. The powerful vital energy in its entire body shook the void and suffused the surroundings, causing the entire heavens and the earth to seem dry and hot. It was a Skylink fiend ape at the Astral Soul Fusion realm. On his left was a slightly smaller blue-eyed white monkey, but its aura wasn't any weaker. It was a divine monkey of the extreme spirit level. It was the current spiritual great sage, who was originally at the primordial true spirit realm. Not long ago, he had successfully refined the astral soul integration realm and demonic soul integration realm. His strength and cultivation had increased by another level. On the right of the heaven-reaching demon ape was a lion-like demon. Purple smoke puffed out of its nostrils as it sat in the void. It turned out to be a swan and eye. Nowadays, the swan and eye with the highest cultivation was at the astral soul integration realm. Many years ago, it had submitted to the Spirit Abyss Mountain, and submitted to the primordial demon ape clan. Usually, it cultivated in the Spirit Abyss Mountain, and was supported by the primordial demon ape clan. When the ape clan needed it, it would also lend a hand. At this moment, it had followed the other 2 ape clan demons to Yan Emperor City. As for whether it was really willing to provoke Xianmen Tianzong, who was currently in the limelight, only the Swan and I himself knew. However, at this moment, the 3 demons at the astral soul integration realm had revealed their true forms and were standing in the void. To the current Yan Emperor City, there was no doubt that they were extremely oppressive. That heaven-reaching demon ape stood in the void, black smoke surging out of his body. Looking at Yan Emperor City, he slowly said, "The 2 of you, let's do it." His gaze swept across Extreme Spiritual Great Sage and Swan and I. Extreme Spiritual Great Sage grinned and did not speak. Extreme Spiritual Great Sage had painstakingly cultivated from the primordial true spirit realm to the astral soul integration realm. Seeing that the Extreme Spiritual Divine Monkey clan was about to rise again, he was naturally not willing to be the vanguard for the heaven-reaching demon ape clan. Even if he wanted to increase his prestige and influence, it would not be too late to do so after he had reached the Dharma-ending realm. However, the heaven-reaching demon ape clan's plan was obviously the opposite. The omnipotent great sage might have had enough magnanimity, confidence, and pride, but the other experts of the omnipotent demonic ape clan had some reservations about the divine spiritual monkey. Currently, Great Sage Yucheng frowned in his heart as he looked at Extreme Spiritual Great Sage. Although the other party had reached the astral soul integration realm later than him, when he stood beside him, Great Sage Yucheng felt uneasy. That white figure seemed shorter than him, but when he looked at him, he felt as though he was looking up to him. This was not because of the accumulated might of Jihuang Xinyuan, nor was it because of the influence of his clan's bloodline. Instead, it was because of the other party's mystique and demonic power. Perhaps because of the depth of his cultivation, his accumulation of demonic power, physical body, and qi were not as good as Great Sage Yucheng's. However, in terms of mystique, Great Sage Yucheng was superior. If the 2 of them fought to the death, it would be hard to predict who would win. However, Great Sage Yucheng had a feeling that he would most likely lose. At this moment, he looked at Great Sage Yucheng. Great Sage Yucheng chuckled and did not say much. His white, furry paw reached out and grabbed towards Yan Emperor City below. Although he was not afraid of Great Sage Yucheng, the strongest expert of the ape clan was still the Great Sage. And the heaven-reaching demon ape clan was also the strongest tribe of the primordial demon apes. Great Sage Yucheng's paw seemed to reach out casually. However, on that furry paw, the snow-white monkey for all stood up, each strand like a raging dragon. All the monkey fur stood up, as hard as fine gold or divine metal. Large amounts of demonic qi gushed out, as black as ink. It fused with the snow-white monkey fur, and turned into a gray haze. The gray monkey paw grew larger and larger, pressing down towards Yan Emperor City with a momentum that could cover the sky. Long Shinka looked up at the sky. The helmet that looked like a dragon head was already covering his head. The visor had fallen off, revealing only a pair of eyes. As the scales on the armor opened and closed, large amounts of dragon might and auspicious clouds surged out, making him look even more majestic. Long Shinka did not move. He lightly stomped his feet. The entire mountain city suddenly lit up. Beams of fiery light shot up into the sky, covering Yan Emperor City. A boundless sea of fire spread out in all directions, covering the sky. In an instant, the surrounding area was turned into a world of flames. The green Xitigarbha true flame and the golden solar true flame lit up together. The flames formed many array patterns, connecting into one. The green flames became Yin flames, while the golden flames became sunlight. With Yan Emperor City as the center, they began to revolve. Yan Emperor City itself, at the center of the yin-yang, was shrouded in golden flames that flickered with red and blue radiance. It was the Nanmingli fire, the core of the array. A huge flaming Tai Chi diagram formed in an instant, appearing in front of Great Sage Yucheng, Great Sage Extreme Spirit, and Taowu Sage. This was the defensive array that Flame Emperor Xiao Yan and Emperor Heluo Li Yuanfang had set up in Yan Emperor City. It was derived from Xiao Yan's own yin-yang burning sky formation. If Xiao Yan were to control it himself, this array could also become the true yin-yang burning sky formation. However, the peak state of the Yin-Yang burning sky formation used different structures of the firmament fire lotus to form the Yin and Yang. It was extremely powerful, but the difficulty of controlling it was undoubtedly much higher. Not to mention the other disciples of Fun Tianya. Even Li Yuanfang could not set up the array independently. But now, after the modification, the formation used a single true fire to set up the formation. The difficulty was greatly reduced. Even if Xiaoyan wasn't here, his disciples as well as Long Shenke could all activate it. The array operated automatically. Long Shenke and the others only needed to activate it. Without using the firmament fire lotus to set up the array, the firepower of a single solar true flame was enhanced to increase its power. The towering flames turned the surrounding world into a sea of fire with the power to burn the heavens. Even when Great Sage Extreme Spirit used the Great Spirit King's hand to grab it, he felt the surface of his hand burning, as though it was about to ignite. Great Sage Extreme Spirit King snorted, and turned to look at Great Sage Yu Cheng and Taowu Sage. The Great Sage of Yu City did not say much this time. His blood-red eyes flashed with ferocity. His huge body, which was like a mountain, floated in midair and fell straight down on Yan Emperor City. It was like a huge mountain was pressing down on them. The void cracked directly, as though it was being crushed. Taowu Sage let out a roar that sounded like a yawn. He snorted lightly and rolling purple smoke surged out from his nose, instantly turning into a thundercloud. Chapter 1397. The purple smoke exhaled by the Bayan Great Sage converged into a purple thundercloud in the void. Lightning flashed within the cloud, illuminating the horizon. This purple thundercloud continued to spread in all directions. It also showed an earth-shattering momentum as it descended towards Yan Emperor City and the True Fire Array. Plumes of smoke filled the air. Within the smoke, one could feel the majestic essence chi of thunder. It transformed into arcs of lightning that intertwined with the smoke in the air. The thunder did not look particularly violent. Instead, it was like smoke drifting down. It looked light and powerless, completely unlike other thunderbolts that were intimidating and ferocious. However, when the smoke-like essence chi landed on the True Fire formation in the sky above Yan Emperor City, the flames immediately danced violently, crackling and exploding like a chain of thunder. The two extremely violent powers of thunder and fire clashed continuously at this moment, turning the sky above Yan Emperor City into a purgatory of thunder and fire. Ordinary people, even human experts who had attained the nascent divinity realm or great demons who had cultivated indestructible demon souls, would not be able to endure being trapped in this purgatory of thunder and fire. It was like entering a land of death. This purple smoke-like thunder was the innate mystique of the Bayan tribe, the cosmic purple smoke thunder. It had always been known as the 8 desolation thunder of the dragon tribe's Brontosaurus. In terms of quality, it was inferior to the 9 heavens godly thunder and the chaotic whole immortal slaying thunder. As such, it was naturally inferior to the destructive powers of the Xitigarbha True Blaze, the Solar True Fire, and the Namingli Fire. However, the Bayan Great Sage's control of the cosmic purple smoke thunder was rather ingenious. The True Fire formation below was activated by the True Fire formation. After all, Long Shenke did not specialize in fire techniques. Although the True Fire formation was operating normally under the attack of the cosmic purple smoke thunder, and the purple smoke-like thunder was completely destroyed, the rotation of Yin and Yang also slowed down slightly. Great Sage Yu Cheng revealed his true form. His physical body's vital energy seemed to be able to shatter the void. Rolling black fog appeared on his body, making his already huge body even more oppressive. His killing intent was overwhelming, causing one's heart to tremble. There were even a few specks of starlight within the surging black mist. They were the stars that Great Sage Yu Cheng had refined and fused into his demon soul. Clearly, Great Sage Yu Cheng had used his full strength in this attack. Although Great Sage Che Lingji and Great Sage Bai and had worked together, Great Sage Yu Cheng hadn't held back either. The heaven-reaching devil ape was now the leader of the primordial devil ape tribe. If there were any gains, the heaven-reaching devil ape would naturally benefit the most. Of course, Great Sage Yu Cheng had the intention of supervising the battle to prevent Great Sage Lingji and Great Sage Bai and from not doing their best. However, when it was time for him to take action, he didn't hesitate at all. The great sage of Yu City was like a divine mountain descending from the heavens, smashing down on the true fire formation from above. In that instant, the ferocious explosive force caused the true fire formation to shake violently, although the layers of raging flames quickly counterattacked, forcing great sage Yu Cheng to circulate the black mist around him, making it difficult for him to discern his position and protect himself. The true fire grand formation was already affected by great sage Yu Cheng's attack. Now, with great sage Yu Cheng's ferocious attack, a gap immediately appeared in the formation. In the boundless sea of fire, large amounts of flames surged towards the gap, filling it up. At the same time, it squeezed great sage Yu Cheng in the center, not giving him a chance to take another step forward. After withstanding great sage Yu Cheng's most ferocious attack, great sage Yu Cheng, who was trapped in the center of the boundless true fire, would suffer. However, just as the gap appeared, before the spirit formation could truly fill it up, great sage Lingji's figure suddenly flashed. That similarly huge body of a small mountain suddenly turned into a beam of flowing light. Like an illusory shadow, it passed through the gap in the true fire grand formation, and descended towards Yan Emperor City itself, which was enveloped by the spirit formation. The first round of interference and restraint, the second round of forceful attacks to create opportunities, and the third round of seizing the opportunity to break in. Although the three great demons at the astral soul unification realm rarely cooperated, they had already reached a tacit understanding in an instant. They struck out a set of attacks that was most suitable to break through the defense of the true fire grand formation. The power of the true fire was ferocious, and the spirit formation focused on the outside but not the inside. After great sage Lingji passed through the spirit formation, he directly attacked Yan Emperor City, his target Long Shinka. The attacks of the great demons came wave after wave. Great sage Lingji had successfully broken through the spirit formation, but he did not plan to rely on himself for the rest. His first task was naturally to receive great sage Yu Cheng and great sage Bayan. When he reached the sky above Yan Emperor City, great sage Lingji did not say much. With a palm strike, demonic power surged and formed the great spiritual king's hand again, grabbing towards Long Shinka's head. This palm strike covered the sky and caused everyone's vision in Yan Emperor City to darken. It was as if the sky had turned black. Long Shinka's expression did not change. He said to Duan Muhang beside him, "You guys control the spirit formation. Just do your best. Don't force yourself." After saying that, his figure flashed and he stepped into the void. He was already in midair, affecting great sage Lingji. Meanwhile, in Yan Emperor City, Duan Muhang had already returned to the main hall. There were cultivators from Fun Tianya's lineage in the hall. They were all at the Yuanying realm. Duan Muhang said, "Martial uncles, let's support the spirit formation together." Everyone was already prepared for battle. They nodded and said, "Senior Long Shinka has gone to meet the enemy. We have already sensed it." After saying that, they did not say anything else. Everyone formed hand seals and sank their consciousness into the true fire spirit formation. Duan Muhang did the same. With their support, the true fire spirit formation continued to press towards great sage Yu Cheng in the center. Yin and Yang were re-established, and the sea of fire formed a spinning posture. It was extremely terrifying. Meanwhile, in the sky above Yan Emperor City, great sage Lingji and Long Shinka were already standing together. At this moment, Long Shinka was like a Dao integration realm martial arts expert. His blood energy might be slightly weak, but his defense was extremely strong. He was facing great sage Lingji's great spiritual king's hand head-on. However, great sage Lingji, who was using the great spiritual king's hand, was a top-notch existence among the great demons of the astral soul unification realm in terms of physical strength. His escape technique was even more exquisite and nimble, making Long Shinka feel like she couldn't even catch his shadow. However, Long Shinka remained calm and guarded Yan Emperor City, especially the main palace where Duan Muhang and the others were. He would not be easily mobilized by great sage Lingji. If great sage Lingji wanted to break the true fire spirit formation, and bring in great sage Yu Cheng and great sage Bayan, he would have to rely on Duan Muhang and the others who were maintaining the spirit formation. Long Shinka guarded this point tightly, so that Great Sage Lingji would not be able to use his escape technique to overtake him. This forced Great Sage Lingji to face him head-on. In a head-on confrontation, Great Sage Lingji was also extremely powerful. Even Long Shunka found it difficult to defend against him when he revealed his true form. However, in this way, Long Shunka would at least have space to unleash his power. Light flashed continuously in Great Sage Lingji's blue eyes, and his ears trembled. This was another of the Great Sage Monkey's heavenly eyes and heavenly ears' mystical abilities. His eyes could observe yin and yang, and his ears could hear the changes of all things. He was best at seeing through the opponent's actual situation. Although it was not like Zhu Yi's Book of Changes, which could deduce all things and principles, it was more sensitive to the instantaneous changes in the opponent's strength and aura. Hence, at the beginning, Long Shunka could still defend against Great Sage Lingji. However, as time passed, he felt more and more pressure. Moreover, the pressure that Great Sage Lingji gave him was growing faster and faster. It seemed to be multiplying every second. This great realization great artifact of yours is not ordinary. I'm afraid it will take me a lot of effort to completely destroy you. However, it will be even more difficult for you to block my path. As Great Sage Lingji spoke, his figure flashed left and right, and he split into two beams of light that circled around Long Shunka. Long Shunka's eyes narrowed slightly. His usually sharp senses could not tell which was real and which was fake. He could only rely on his own consciousness to choose one of them. His body moved horizontally, and he attacked Great Sage Lingji's figure on the right. The violent power locked the void, preventing Great Sage Lingji's two bodies from changing between each other, turning illusory into real, or turning illusory into illusory. The blue-eyed white monkey on the right paused slightly and blocked Long Shunka's attack. The collision of magic power and demonic power calmed Long Shunka down a little. This is real. Before he could finish his thought, he saw the blue-eyed white monkey's furry face reveal a rather human-like smile. It was full of mockery. Long Shunka's mind that had just relaxed tightened again. He turned his head and saw that the supreme spiritual divine monkey that had rushed past him on the left was charging into Yen Emperor City without looking back. The supreme spiritual divine monkey in front of him was gradually turning into an illusory bubble. At a certain moment, both were real. Long Shunka realized this, but Great Sage Lingji had already broken through his obstruction and arrived above the main hall of Yen Emperor City. Violent demonic power gathered, and he punched the top of the main hall heavily. Above the main hall, a huge flame pattern lit up and blocked Great Sage Lingji's attack. However, following Great Sage Lingji's attack, the main hall also shook slightly. Duan Muhong and the others in the hall were greatly affected. Great Sage Lingji's shrill howl seemed to resound from the bottom of their hearts, causing their spirits to tremble. Even though Duan Muhong and the other spirits were not weak, the difference in their realms was too great. With Great Sage Lingji's interruption, their activation of the true fire formation was naturally affected. Great Sage Yucheng was originally squeezed in the center, and the raging true fire formation was about to burn and refine him. However, at this moment the fire suddenly paused and even showed signs of weakening. Great Sage Bai, who had been using the purple smoke cosmic thunder to attack from the outside to help Great Sage Yucheng reduce the pressure on the true fire formation, shouted. The originally light purple smoke suddenly condensed rapidly, turning into a dark purple ball of air. Its color was almost black. Within that ball of air, there were faint starlight flashing. However, what was more eye-catching was the black lightning snakes rampaging within the ball of air, displaying an extremely violent power. Although the ball of air itself still looked light and weak, the power within it was quite impressive. The ball of chi exploded on the true fire formation, instantly forming a powerful explosive force. Grasping the opportunity in that instant, when the true fire formation slowed down, it once again shook the true fire formation, and tore the hole that originally existed in the true fire formation even more. Great Sage Yucheng held at the sky, and followed closely behind Great Sage Lingji. He also passed through the true fire formation's obstruction and landed on Yen Emperor City. Chapter 1398. Great Sage Yucheng's mountain-like body, even larger than Great Sage Lingji, also appeared above Yen Emperor City and then descended. Behind him, Great Sage Bayan followed closely, silently breaking through the true fire formation and attacking Yan Emperor City together. Above the city walls, Long Shinka and Duan Muhang and the others in the main hall all had solemn expressions, but they did not panic. Inside the main hall, there was a huge space-time formation that was flashing with light. At this moment, the light suddenly became even more dazzling. Seeing this, Duan Muhang and the others relaxed slightly. We made it. Within the light, space and time twisted, and two figures appeared before everyone. One was a purple-clothed young woman with an elegant and noble face that no one dared to look at directly. The other was a slightly ferocious-looking burly man. His eyes flashed with both cunning and savagery. Seeing the purple-clothed girl, Duan Muhang immediately bowed. "Greetings, Uncle Master Tianqing." The other Xianmen Tianzong disciples in the main hall also nodded in greeting. "Junior Sister Tianqing." "Senior Sister Tianqing." "Junior Sister Lin." "Senior Sister Lin." This girl was the master of Fun Tianya, the adopted daughter of Flame Emperor Xiaoyan. She was one of the two great primordial spirit experts of Xianmen Tianzong Fun Tianya's second-generation direct disciple, Dao Master Tianqing, Lin Tong. Her current appearance was that of a 15 or 16-year-old girl, slender and elegant. When Lin Tong saw everyone, he also bowed and said with a smile, "It's not too late." Time was tight, and she did not stand on ceremony. With a turn of her body, she landed among the crowd and sat down cross-legged. Her hands formed a seal. The next moment, Lin Tong had already shed her human form and revealed her primordial spirit incarnation, which turned into a huge flaming Tai Chi diagram. The space in the main hall twisted, becoming vast and boundless. However, this flaming Tai Chi diagram was so vast that it seemed to occupy the entire space. Above this flaming Tai Chi diagram, a tall ancient tree stood in the air. Its trunk was straight, and its leaves were luxuriant. It exuded a lofty aura. It was a divine Wutong tree. Around the divine Wutong tree, milky white pure yang true fire burned. The fire did not look violent, but it exuded a gentle feeling. However, it was extremely pure and incomparably pure. As the white flames intersected, they formed the image of a phoenix on the divine Wutong tree. The white phoenix let out a clear cry. "Senior Lu Yuan, please make your move. Let's fight these big macaques together." The fierce-looking big man who had arrived with Lin Tong chuckled when he heard this. He took a step out of the main hall, and his body began to swell. His human face gradually turned into a tiger's head. In the end, this demon's body reached an indomitable spirit, and he looked even larger than the great sage of Peak City. He had the head of a tiger and the body of an ape, and his eyes were as bright as the sun and moon. He was the great sage Lu Yuan. Seeing him, great sage Yu Cheng, extreme spirit sage, and Bayan frowned slightly. Although he was subdued by Lin Feng, the master of the celestial sect of wonders, and entered Xianmen Tianzong, he rarely continued to walk in the world. But the fierce name of the great sage Lu Yuan still spread far and wide. Until now, no one thought that being subdued by the master of the celestial sect of wonders was a humiliating thing. The great sage Lu Yuan laughed coldly. After glancing at the great sage of Peak City and extreme spirit sage, he ignored the two great demons that had already broken into Yan Emperor City. Instead, he charged towards the great sage Bayan. The great sage Bayan's expression changed slightly. Although the physical strength of the Bai and clan was not weak, it could not compare to the Lu Yuan of the same realm. Furthermore, the mirror manifestation of Lu Yuan's clan could faintly restrain his purple smoke cosmos thunder. Unlike the great sage of Peak City, who specialized in physical strength, and the great sage of spirit sage's mystical abilities, great sage Bayan was the one that great sage Lu Yuan could restrain the most. The great sage Lu Yuan's plan at this moment was clearly to start with the easiest one to deal with. He wanted to end the battle quickly, and then return to join forces with the others to deal with the great sage of Peak City and extreme spirit sage. The great sage of Peak City frowned slightly. Just as he was about to step forward, phoenix cries rang out incessantly from the main hall of Yan Emperor City. The entire true fire formation changed, descending towards Yan Emperor City. A white fire phoenix rose from Yan Emperor City. It was only 6 feet tall, but when it spread its wings, it seemed to stretch for tens of thousands of miles. the yin and yang true fire formation rotated separately. Raging flames descended. The Xitigarbha true flame, which was filled with yin fire, extended on the left wing of the white fire phoenix, while the yang true flame, which was red as yang fire, extended on the right wing. At this moment, the white fire phoenix was like the intersection point where yin and yang converged. It shook its green and gold flaming wings, which covered the sky, and attacked towards the great sage of Peak City. Although it was no longer like the true fire formation from before, the destructive power of the fire phoenix was even fiercer than before. Lin Tong was formed from the heart of the Wutong tree, and was innately close to the pure yang true flame. At this moment, he was like the spirit of the true fire, controlling the fire phoenix of the true fire formation. He was even more skilled than Longshinka. Even the great sage of Peak City's gaze was extremely solemn at this moment. He even felt an abnormal premonition of danger from the depths of his heart. If he was not careful, he felt that he would not be able to handle it. Even if he has the advantage of the formation's terrain power, he is only at the primordial spirit incarnation realm. As expected, Xianmen Tianzong cultivators cannot be underestimated. The great sage of Peak City did not dare to be careless. He stepped into the void and suddenly leaped up, as though he had stepped onto the path to heaven. This was not a demonic power escape technique, but a leap that was purely an outburst of physical strength. It originated from the powerful physical strength of the heaven-reaching demon apes, causing their speed to be even faster and more ferocious than most bird-type demons when they used escape techniques. Moreover, this leap was not only fast, but also had a powerful explosive force. It instantly shattered the space, time, and other forces that their opponent had placed on them. Using brute force to break through techniques, when the strength of the great path exceeded a certain limit, it would instead interfere with the principles and laws of heaven and earth. This was originally a technique of the human race's martial arts adepts, and it was even more vividly displayed by the heaven-reaching demon apes, who had top-notch physical strength. The great sage of Peak City leaped, his figure rapidly turning into a small black dot in the void, jumping out of the power of the fire phoenix. In the next moment, the black dot suddenly grew larger and fell again. It was like a falling star, crashing into the ground and crashing towards the fire phoenix in Yan Emperor City. In the main hall of Yan Emperor City, above the Tai Chi diagram formed by Lin Tong's primordial spirit, the divine Wutong tree's branches and leaves swayed, and the phoenix resting on it emitted waves of clear cries. Around her primordial spirit incarnation, Duan Muhong and the others continued to sit. Their hands formed seals, and the flame matrix patterns condensed as though they were solid. The spirit design became increasingly clear. In the void outside the main hall, the fire phoenix, which covered the sky and the sun, spread its wings. On its flaming wings, the matrix patterns flashed continuously. In the next moment, the wings retracted, and the fire phoenix's body also rapidly shrank, as though it had turned into a small flame. There was no ferocious aura in the flame. Instead, it shone brightly noble and proud. It was not overbearing, but no one could ignore it. Although the flame was small, the great sage of Yucheng, who was falling from the sky, felt that he could not avoid it. As long as he landed on Yan Emperor City, he would definitely come into contact with the flame formed by the phoenix. The two sides very quickly collided. Black mist and flames bloomed in the void. From an extremely small point, they spread out in all directions, forming a wave of fire that swept out in all directions. In the air, the great sage of Yucheng let out a miserable groan. He seemed to be in great pain. The protective black light around his body was burned to nothing by the raging flames. His mountain-like body was covered in flames, and it continued to explode, forming wave after wave of fire. The great sage of Yucheng's eyes, which were like two blood-red stars, dimmed a little at this moment. However, his claws were now firmly gripping a fire phoenix. His entire body's qi and blood exploded, and there seemed to be layers of universes and starry skies in his body being destroyed one after another. The great sage of Yucheng opened his mouth and roared. One could vaguely see starlight flickering in his mouth. It was a real star, a star refined by the great sage's demon soul and demonic power. The star completely exploded at this moment, unleashing a boundless force that pushed the great sage of Yucheng's power to a peak in an instant. The terrifying force actually tore the fire phoenix apart. The great sage of Yuqing let out a long breath. His astonishing aura rapidly fell from its peak, becoming dim and weak. However, what made his scalp go numb was that above the main hall of Flame Emperor City, there was a huge spirit design revolving continuously. A towering tree grew out of the spirit design. Flames blazed on the treetop, bursting with vigorous vitality. After the fire phoenix was torn apart by the great sage of Yuqing, it didn't continue to struggle. Instead, it scattered into streams of fire. However, at this moment, another phoenix cry rang out from the flames at the top of the tree. The cry grew louder and louder. The great sage of Yuqing frowned slightly. His figure leaped up again, soaring into the sky. This time, he charged towards the great sage of Lu Yuan and the great sage of Baiyan. On the other side, the great sage of Lingji, who had the upper hand, also abandoned Longshenka and charged towards the great sage of Lu Yuan. Seeing this, the great sage of Lu Yuan, who had already forced the great sage of Bai and into a corner, curled his lips and flashed away, evading the attacks of the great sage of Yuqing and the great sage of Lingji. After the three great demons converged, the great sage of Yuqing's expression was unsightly. With a low grunt, he summoned a black stream of light. The stream of light transformed into a ball of light in the void. 3 beams of black light shot out from the ball and landed on the 3 demons. The great sage of Lingji and the great sage of Bai, and showed dissatisfaction and resistance in their eyes, but they didn't say anything. They'd originally come to probe Xianmen Tianzong and the Divine Land's human cultivation world. Now that they couldn't even see the Flame Emperor, Xiaoyan, how could this be considered a probe? It wasn't just the great sage of Yuqing. The two of them also lost face. They immediately poured all their demon power into the black ball of light and offered a bit of their blood essence as a sacrifice. The next moment, the black ball of light exploded with astonishing power. The great sage of Lu Yuan, Longshenka, and Lin Tong were all shocked. The few of them wanted to work together to stop the great sage of Yuqing and the others, but the black ball of light rapidly expanded. In the blink of an eye, it had become extremely huge. Then, a huge palm stretched out from the black ball of light and grabbed at Yin Emperor City. Under this palm, it seemed as if the entire vast Tianhuang mainland was within its grasp. Chapter 1399. A huge pitch-black claw stretched out from the black ball of light. The back of the claw was covered in fluffy black fur that was as hard as steel. The center of the palm was a patch of bluish-black. This palm fully demonstrated what it meant to cover the sky with a single hand. Even covering the sky was not enough to describe its size. The palm fell towards Yin Emperor City. Great Sage Liyuan, Lin Tong, and the others did not feel as if they were in total darkness. The sun was still shining brightly above their heads. However, everyone could not help but feel that the world they were in seemed to be in the palm of this giant hand. At this moment, the huge Yin Emperor City was like a grain of sand that was about to be gripped by this pitch-black giant claw. Great Sage Liyuan took a deep breath. It's the manifestation of the Great Sage's demonic power. The 3 of them used their own essence, blood, and demonic power as a guide, using special treasures to guide the Great Sage's power here. Enveloped by the huge black claw, the surrounding heaven and earth shook. The void seemed as if it would shatter at any moment. The spiritual qi in the surroundings became chaotic. Endless flames flickered in the sky above Yin Emperor City as a powerful force exploded. The distortions in time and space seemed to be contained. Yin Emperor City seemed to be expanding, causing the surrounding heaven and earth to expand as well. It struggled free from that huge palm. Great Sage Liyuan, Lin Tong, Longshenka, and the others naturally would not wait helplessly for death. They used all sorts of methods to resist. The true fire formation was pushed to the limit by Lin Tong, Duan Muhang, and the others. It dispelled the fire phoenix's attack form and turned into a towering tree made entirely of flames. Although it was made of flames, everyone present could feel the powerful life force contained within, which was gradually being converted into defensive power. It was a divine Wutong tree. Its branches towered into the sky and rose high to resist the omnipotent sage's huge black claw that was pressing down. Longshenka and Great Sage Liyuan also exerted their strength, working together with Lin Tong, who was controlling the Yin-Yang burning sky formation, to resist the Great Sage. We're only using treasures to guide him temporarily, Great Sage Lu Yuan said in a low voice. Otherwise, Yu Cheng and the others will not be able to hold out. Their essence, blood and demonic power will be sucked dry. Lin Tong and Long Shenke also understood this principle. However, understanding this principle and successfully overcoming the current crisis were two different things. When the two sides collided head-on, Lin Tong and the others immediately felt their bodies tremble as they felt a great pressure. The distorted time and space seemed to fall into a strange stillness at this moment. The huge black claw clashed with the power of the space where Yin Emperor City was, causing time to stop at this moment. However, in the next instant, the momentum of the Yin Emperor City's expansion was once again suppressed by the huge claw. Space started to warp and compress once more. Even though it was slow, it faintly revealed a momentum that was impossible to resist, and it was gradually on the verge of being grasped by the enormous claw once more. The dark green palm crushed the layers of true fire, dissipating the white demonic light spat out by Great Sage Lu Yuan, and completely suppressing Long Shenke's power. The divine Wutong tree, which was formed from flames, was brimming with vitality. However, at this moment, it was being suppressed by that immense power. Great Sage Lu Yuan's mirror manifestation mystique could not be used in front of this greenish-black palm. As for his and Long Shenke's physical strength, when compared to the Great Sage, it was like the difference between an adult and a toddler. That huge greenish-black claw did not invoke any profound concepts, nor did it fight tit for tat. It did not use methods to restrain the true fire formation, nor did it search for the flaws in the true fire formation's operation. What it possessed was the ultimate power of one's physical body and blood. It was incomparably majestic, as if it could control the universe with its fingers and crush the heavens. Other than power, there was only power. The great power that interfered with the principles and laws originated from the great demon with the strongest physical strength in the world, the Great Sage. Great Sage Lu Yuan, Lin Tong, Long Shenke, and the others all felt their hearts sink. They could vaguely tell that before the Great Sage of Yu City and the other two great demons could not hold on any longer, Yin Emperor City would be the first to be breached by the Great Sage. For a moment, Yin Emperor City seemed to be on the brink of collapse. But at this moment, the three words, Yin Emperor City, engraved on one side of the cliff of the majestic city, that had been rebuilt from the entire Spirit Mountain suddenly lit up. Beams of purple radiance shot out from the engraved words on the cliff, turning into purple auspicious clouds that made Yin Emperor City, which was enveloped in raging flames, look even more vast and ethereal. In the next moment, bolts of lightning flashed and jumped among the purple auspicious clouds. Lightning did not have a single color. Every bolt of lightning was made up of 4 colors: red, yellow, green, and blue intertwined. It was as if the 4 colors were intertwined together, looking rather mysterious. Although the 4 colors formed a bolt of lightning, they were clearly distinguished and could be clearly distinguished. Above the 4-colored lightning, there were also black and white flashing and intertwining. Great Sage of Mount Chung, Great Sage of Extreme Sprite, and Great Sage of Bai, and felt their hearts clench when they saw this. A deep, cold voice came from the sphere of light that stretched out from the giant black hand above their heads. Lin Feng? The Great Sage immediately sensed the origin of the 4-colored lightning in the purple thunderclouds. It was the Yin and Yang 4 symbols thunderbolt that Lin Feng's Brontosaurus clone cultivated. It was a brand new thunder technique that Lin Feng had created after refining Brontosaurus's clone. It did not exist in the world before, but it was superior to the 8 Desolation Thunderbolt of the Brontosaurus clan. Great Sage Yu City, High Spirit Sage, and Bai and Great Sage felt bitter. The 3 huge words engraved on the cliff of Yin Emperor City were left behind by Lin Feng's Brontosaurus clone, when he came to the infinite wasteland vast land to inscribe for his eldest disciple, Xiaoyan, when the majestic city was first built. Such a miraculous technique was not uncommon among the top experts of the great heaven primordial world. However, what made Great Sage Yu City and the others' hearts sink was that the traces left behind by Lin Feng's Brontosaurus clone not only showed 4-colored lightning, but also layers of purple auspicious clouds. It was clearly the magical power of the clone's main body. Lin Feng's Brontosaurus clone had extraordinary strength, but it was still not as strong as the Great Sage. If it were Great Sage U City and the others attacking, it would be very difficult to destroy the words as a magical power restriction. However, if the Great Sage attacked, he could quickly wear it down. After all, it was just a trace left behind by demon power. However, supported by the purple clouds, the four-colored lightning seemed endless and would continue to exist until the end of time. The four-colored lightning flashing with black and white light, at this moment, fused with the raging true fire around Yan Emperor City, forming a flashing red, yellow, green, and blue lightning dragon. Around its body there were vast fire powers like the Solar True Fire, Xidagarba True Fire, and Pure Yang True Fire. The Brontosaurus shadow let out a roar that shook the 9 heavens. It soared into the sky, causing the space around Yan Emperor City to expand rapidly. Together, it broke free from the claws of the Great Sage. The Great Sage snorted coldly. The huge demon claw retracted slightly, then clenched into a fist. Like a huge hammer that could break the sky, it smashed towards the Brontosaurus and the majestic city. The Brontosaurus let out a series of dragon roars. Its body rose and fell in the sea of purple clouds, its head and tail nowhere to be seen. Rolling four-colored lightning burst out from the sea of purple clouds, fusing with the raging fire. As the lightning and fire exploded, it turned into a huge light pillar. Within the light pillar, lightning and fire interweaved, piercing through the sky and earth, and met the iron fist of the Great Sage. The two sides collided in the void, causing heavy storms that swept in all directions. The space was completely shattered. Spatial cracks filled the space between heaven and earth, forming terrifying black cracks. This part of infinite wasteland seemed to be fragmented, as if it was about to collapse completely. Lightning, sparks, and flames scattered everywhere, making this place look like purgatory. The cold snort of the Great Sage came from the void. The huge greenish-black palm retracted, returning into the light sphere. The Great Sage of U City, the Great Spiritual Sage, and the Great Sage of Bayan watched this scene with bitterness in their hearts. Previously, the defense of Lin Tong, Lu Yuan, and the others would be broken before the three of them could hold on. But now the situation was completely reversed. It was hard to say when the Great Sage would be able to break through Yan Emperor City. But before that, the three of them would definitely have died of exhaustion. The Great Sage retracted his palm, and the black light sphere also disappeared completely, as if it had never existed. The three demons of the Great Sage of U City let out a dejected roar, then immediately retreated. If it was only Lu Yuan, Lin Tong, and Long Shinka, the three demons of the Great Sage of U City could break through Yan Emperor City and retreat safely. But at this moment, the roaring Brontosaurus rushed out of the purple auspicious clouds, pouncing towards the three demons of the unified astral soul's realm. The expressions of the three demons of the Great Sage of U City changed slightly. As the four-colored Brontosaurus danced in the air, it was like Lin Feng's Brontosaurus had descended. The shadow of death shrouded the hearts of the three demons. However, at the same time, the void far away from Yan Emperor City suddenly shook, and a tall figure stepped out. It was a giant ape with a white head and red feet. Its body was as white as jade, and its four crimson limbs were propped up on the ground like burning flames. Its body was incomparably huge, as if it could support the heavens and the earth. It had a pair of crimson eyes that flashed with green light. Its majestic demonic power shook the heavens and the earth, but it was also a great ape demon of the Dharma-ending realm. It was the current leader of the Zhuyan demonic ape clan, Great Sage Zhuyan. Unlike the Great Sage, he had come here with his real body. He had been hiding and not coming out, so as to prevent top experts like Xiao Yin of Xianmen Tianzong, like the Yan Emperor, from suddenly appearing. At the same time, he had been observing silently. But now he had no choice but to make a move. The Great Sage Zhuyan stood motionless in the void, and his eyes shot out beams of green and red light. Wherever the light passed, the void seemed to freeze. Even the powerful lightning dragon slowed down. The next moment, the void twisted and collapsed, and the world fell into a storm of thunder and fire. But at this moment, the void in the sky cracked, and endless calamities of the nether sea appeared. A voice came from within, sun-chasing Zhuyan. You finally couldn't resist showing yourself? Chapter 1400. There was a crack in the sky. The true water of the blood river, the true water of the underworld, the mysterious heaven tribulation flame, the 9 serenities wind, and all the other calamities of the nether sea seemed to be gushing out of the crack with great momentum. However, these terrifying forces were now under human control, and seemed to have become calm and peaceful. However, the deeper meaning of this made the hearts of Zhu Yan, the great sage of Yucheng, and the other great demons even heavier. Through the crack, a purple-clothed young man in a black robe could be vaguely seen. He looked heroic and heroic, sitting in the chaotic void of the nether sea. He was surrounded by the black mysterious heaven tribulation flame, and the bluish-purple nether evil light, like the Emperor of Flames. It was Yan Emperor Xiaoyan, the eldest disciple of the celestial sect Master Lin Feng. There seemed to be layers of fire jumping in Xiaoyan's eyes, but his gaze was cold and devoid of warmth. He stared at Zhu Yan and the others. Looking at Xiaoyan, the great sage of Yucheng, the great sage of extreme spirit, and the great sage of Bayan all felt a sense of fear. The human cultivator in front of them, not to mention his age, was indeed only in the realm of refining spirit to void, but he made them feel a sense of crisis when facing an expert in the Dharma-ending realm. In normal times, most cultivators in the realm of returning to void would not take them seriously in front of the great sage of Yucheng and the other 2 demons. But at this moment, facing Xiaoyan, the great sage of Yucheng and the other 2 greater demons who had merged their astral souls as one, they actually felt a sense of dread rising from the depths of their hearts. To them, this was an extremely rare thing. But right now it had truly happened. And the Xiaoyan who gave them this feeling had a cultivation base that was even lower than theirs. In the great Tianyuan world, it was widely recognized that Xianmen Tianzong was a superior place for talented people. However, every time they faced the 4 heroes of the celestial sect, Xiaoyan, Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and Shi Tianhao, this feeling would be particularly strong. Even great Saint Zhu Yan had a feeling that Xiaoyan, who was in the realm of refining spirit and returning to the void, was enough to pose a threat to him in the Dharma-ending realm, especially when Xiaoyan had opened the Nether Sea realm crack, and could guide the power of the Nether Sea to descend upon this place at any time. Great Saint Zhu Yan was even more uncertain. Xiaoyan's appearance here was clearly an ambush. He wouldn't release the eagle until he saw the rabbit. His target was the great sage of Yucheng and the others hiding behind the great demons. If great sage Zhu Yan didn't show up, he wouldn't show up either. The great Saint Zhu Yan had no idea what Xianmen Tianzong's arrangements were, so he could not help but feel uneasy. They already knew that there were experts of the dragon race approaching the Heavenly Desolation Emperor Shi Tianhao's Heavenly Desolation residence, which was also on the vast Tianhuang mainland, to restrain Shi Tianhao, making it difficult for him to act rashly. However, apart from Heavenly Emperor Shi Tianhao, it was hard to guess what the other top experts of Xianmen Tianzong were doing at this time. Although many thoughts flashed through his mind, great Saint Zhu Yan's reaction was not slow at all. When he saw Xiaoyan, he said unhurriedly, "My children are a bit wild, so I'll take them back to discipline them. I've embarrassed myself in front of you, Emperor Yan." His tone was calm, but his movements did not slow down at all. His demonic power directly swept the great sage of Yucheng and the other 3 demons, and then his flame-like red limbs stepped on the void. His figure broke through the space of this world and retreated far away. Xiaoyan did not come out of the Nether Sea and descend upon the vast thousand world. But as his mind moved, the Nether Sea crack that seemed to be a scar between heaven and earth suddenly expanded. A huge suction came from the crack, and thousands of fierce disasters turned into a huge whirlpool that kept spinning. Great Saint Zhu Yan's expression changed slightly. He had already revealed his true form, but he could still feel the huge suction. The Nether Sea crack was like the mouth of a giant beast, about to swallow him. What really made great Saint Zhu Yan frown was that the center of the whirlpool seemed to be where Xiaoyan was. Can the power of the Nether Sea be used like this? In the center of the whirlpool, Xiaoyan sat in the void, as if he was in a different time and space from the thousands of disasters around him. Behind him there was a vague flash of fierce red brilliance, as if the source of the disasters. Great Saint Zhu Yan frowned. White jade-like brilliance flowed on his body, and illusory crimson flames ignited on his limbs and feet. He stepped on the void, climbing higher and higher. With every step he took, he seemed to cross a layer of world. His movements did not seem as fierce and violent as the heavenly demonic apes leaped to the sky, but he won in endurance, which was good for long-distance travel. At this moment, every step he took was like stepping on invisible stairs. It seemed slow, but he actually broke free from the huge suction of the whirlpool of the Nether Sea. But Xiaoyan laughed, and then the whirlpool that swept up thousands of calamities and tribulations instantly reversed. Endless calamities and tribulations gushed out, and actually had a tendency to merge into one, turning into a colorful dim light pillar, shooting straight towards Zhu Yan. Wherever the light beam passed, the space was suddenly annihilated into nothingness, as if doomsday had come. Great Saint Zhu Yan looked solemn and serious. He stepped on the air, and his movements suddenly became a little more violent. The white jade-like brilliance around him became more majestic. It was not dazzling and bright, but as gentle as jade. However, it enveloped his huge body, making Great Saint Zhu Yan look like a white jade mountain. At the foot of this white jade mountain, a large number of crimson flames flickered, making Great Saint Zhu Yan look like a small mountain in the ancestral land of the Zhu Yan demonic ape. However, at this moment, this small mountain was constantly shaking, and the earth was shaking. Great Saint Zhu Yan wanted to fight a big battle with Xiaoyan. With the warriors of the dragon tribe holding him back, Shi Tianhao wanted to help, but it was not completely without scruples. And the real body of the great sage was already rushing here, and he could descend at any time. Unless Lin Feng was still in the divine land and did not enter the spirit sea, or Xianli did not care about the possible threat of Yuan Dragon King, Great Saint Zhu Yan would not panic. But at this moment, he suddenly received a voice transmission from the great sage. Zuri, retreat first. The situation has changed. Don't be impatient. Great Saint Zhu Yan was slightly stunned. From what the great sage said, it seemed that he did not intend to rush to Yan Emperor City. The situation is in our favor. Your long-cherished wish of flattening Mount Shu is just around the corner. The cold and majestic voice of the great sage continued. Retreat now. There is no need to entangle with Xianmen Tianzong anymore. We already know what we want to know. Now is not the time to compete with Xianmen Tianzong. His voice stopped here. Great Saint Zhu Yan frowned, but he chose to believe in the great sage. He looked up to the sky and roared, shaking all directions. Before the dark beam of light could reach him, Great Saint Zhu Yan twisted the space-time and seemed to slow down the beam of light. In fact, the light beam only seemed to slow down. At this moment, the space between Great Saint Zhu Yan and Xiao Yan was extended infinitely, becoming extremely far away, as if they could never reach each other. The dark light beam contained a powerful artistic conception. It traveled through space and time, almost ignoring the existence of space distance. But at this moment, there seemed to be a more ingenious way to manipulate space, so that the dark light beam could not directly surpass it. This was the innate magic of the Zhuyan demonic ape clan. Its control of the artistic conception of space was not inferior to that of the chaotic clan of the four primordial evils, and the Hui dragon clan of the dragon clan. Great Saint Zhu Yan had reached the Dharma-ending realm, and his control of the artistic conception of space had reached an astonishing height. But at this moment, his expression did not relax at all. Instead, it became more and more serious. Because although the speed of that dark pillar of light that Xiaoyan activated seemed to have slowed down, it was still continuously approaching him. According to Great Saint Zhu Yan's original intention, the space-time shift was to make the dark light beam not only unable to approach him, but also gradually move away. The subtlety of his manipulation of space could make the target close to him in an instant, and the distance between them would disappear. At the same time, he could make the target move away from him in an instant, so that they would never meet again. But at this moment, the dark light beam was still chasing behind him, like a maggot in the tarsal bone, and he could not get rid of it. The master of the Celestial Gate is famous for the way of spatial transformation. As his disciple, Xiaoyan, Great Saint Zhu Yan was agitated. Among Lin Feng's personal disciples, Wang Lin, Shi Tianhao, and Yu Hongyan were the best at the changes of the artistic conception of space. Although Xiaoyan was not famous for it, his attainments in it were not shallow. At this moment, He was sitting in the underworld sea, activating the power of the underworld sea, and integrating his own Tao power into it, making Great Saint Zhu Yin unable to ignore it. Great Saint Zhu Yin wanted to stop and simply fight with Xiao Yan, but there was a voice in his heart that warned him not to do so. The dark light beam was originally transformed by the underworld sea whirlpool, and Xiao Yan could control it at will. Once Great Saint Zhu Yin came into contact with it, the light beam instantly turned into a whirlpool again, sucking Great Saint Zhu Yin in. It would be difficult for him to escape, and he could only fight to the death with Xiao Yan. Therefore, although he was unwilling, Great Saint Zhu Yin did not look back. He flew all the way and went far away, and the dark light beam kept chasing Great Saint Zhu Yin, extending all the way into the distant void. It was thousands of miles away, and it did not stop for a long time. The place where Yan Emperor City was had regained its peace. In the crack of the underworld sea above, Xiao Yan's expression did not change, but he frowned and thought, something is wrong with him running so resolutely. It is reasonable to say that the great sage should be on his way. Although Zhu Yin the great sage's temperament was not as fierce and violent as the omnipotent sage's, it was not a good temper either. In the end he actually withdrew without even turning his head back. Even Xiao Yan felt that it was unexpected. After all, the primordial demonic ape clan wanted to test the strength of the divine land. But they were resolved by Xianmen Tianzong one after another, far from achieving their expected goal. The ancient emperor of the ancient dynasty, the overlord of the southern wilderness of the divine land, had moved to the region passage connecting the southern wilderness and the vast land of infinite wasteland, so that Shi Tianhao could leave the infinite wasteland villa, and was now on his way to Yan Emperor City. But Xiao Yan believed that the great sage should also be on his way. Under such circumstances, Great Saint Zhu Yan's behavior of fleeing at the sight of the wind was really abnormal. This inevitably aroused Xiao Yan's vigilance. He was confident in his own strength and the strength of his sect, but he was not arrogant. Just as he was muttering to himself, his heart suddenly moved slightly. He felt that there was an unexpected change in the underworld sea where he lived. The violent underworld sea became more and more chaotic. Chapter 1401. Xiao Yan frowned slightly as he sensed the changes in the underworld sea. Ever since the end of the war between the two worlds, he had been living in the underworld sea and working hard to refine it. Although he was still a long way from success, he had undoubtedly gained a lot. Personally speaking, he was the person with the deepest understanding of the underworld sea after Wen Qiang. And in this process, there have always been people creating obstructions for Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan has a rough idea in his heart who the obstructors are. It's not the first or second time he's had to go back and forth with them. But this time, the other party had caused a far greater commotion than before. It caused huge waves in the underworld sea, and even Xiao Yan had to deal with it seriously. And what concerned Xiao Yan was that the strange changes of the primordial demon ape race and the sudden chaos in the underworld sea were too coincidental. He could not help but have some guesses. Although he did not have a good impression of Taishu Temple, they would probably not collude with the demons at a critical juncture like the battle for the Spirit Sea. Taishu Temple's Grand Elder Wu Mingqi, who could draw on the power of the underworld sea, would definitely cause trouble for Xiao Yan in the process of refining the underworld sea. But this was a dispute between Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple, and they would not rope in the demons. If the demons found out and invaded the divine land, Taishu Temple would also be threatened. The Haotian Mirror's departure from White Cloud Mountain had caused a huge commotion that could not be hidden. Compared to Xianmen Tianzong, who still needed to test the waters, everyone knew that the Haotian Mirror had entered the Spirit Sea. At this moment, Taishu Temple was even more vulnerable than Xianmen Tianzong. It might even become a target of the demons, like the Mount Shu Sword sect and the Great Qin dynasty. At the end of the day, the relationship between Taishu Temple and the powerful demons of Tianhuang Vastland was also very bad. The king of the underworld, or that Shintuzhe? Xiao Yan furrowed his brows and remained silent. As he pondered, he communicated with the heavenly adversity in the netherworld sea to calm down the strange movements there. On the vast infinite wasteland, the area where Yan Emperor City was located had regained its peace. Yin Emperor City was still standing tall on the land. However, the surrounding world had already been destroyed by the previous battle, and it looked desolate. The pulsation of the world's spiritual qi was also extremely chaotic. It would take a long time to recover before it could return to the right track. However, it was impossible to completely restore it to its previous state. In the process of recovery and adjustment, there would definitely be changes to harmonize with the dramatic changes in the weather. A battle between Great Sage Lu Yuan and Great Sage Peak City was enough to change the entire world. As for the battle between Xiao Yan, the Great Sage Great Saint Juyan, and Lin Feng's Brontosaurus doppelganger, if it were not for them restraining and canceling each other out, it would have been enough to turn this place into nothingness. In the main hall of Yin Emperor City, Lin Tong, Duan Muhang, and the others were sitting cross-legged. Long Shenke and Great Sage Lu Yuan, who had transformed into a human form, had also returned to the hall and were quietly resting. Not long after, the sky and earth in the distance broke open, and a tall young man stepped out. He walked on the vast land of infinite wasteland, looking even more ferocious than a great demon. It was Huang Tian Emperor Shi Tianhao. Shi Tianhao stepped on the void and came to the sky above Yin Emperor City, facing the huge crack in the Netherworld Sea. The crack in the space had been maintained like a door. At this moment, the various vicious disasters of the Netherworld Sea seemed to be under control and became calm. Inside the crack, Xiaoyan sat in the void. He seemed to be right in front of them, but also seemed to be far away. Seeing Shi Tianhao's arrival, Xiaoyan opened his eyes and said, "The changes in the Netherworld Sea and the sudden retreat of the primordial demon ape race seem to have something to do with it." Hearing him say this, Shi Tianhao raised his eyebrows slightly. So the people causing trouble in the Netherworld Sea are in cahoots with the demon race? Xiaoyan said, "Whether they are really in cahoots, and to what extent, is still uncertain. But at least they are communicating with each other. Perhaps they are using each other, borrowing each other's power." Shi Tianhao nodded and grinned. "Let's see what kind of waves they can stir up." He paused slightly, then looked at Xiaoyan and continued. "The divine continent side has Aunt Xianli after all. On the contrary, eldest senior brother, the situation on your side might be a bit more complicated. Aunt Xianli can't enter the Netherworld Sea. As long as Xiaoyan did not completely control Heaven's Calamity and the Netherworld Sea, Heaven's Calamity would be extremely hostile to the Heaven-crushing sword. If Xuanli stepped into the Netherworld Sea, she would immediately be attacked by Heaven's Calamity. Regardless of victory or defeat, Xiaoyan, who was with Xuanli, would immediately be repelled by the Netherworld Sea, and all his previous efforts would be in vain. Although the principle was different from the Spirit Sea, the results were similar. Being in the Netherworld Sea, Xiaoyan had half the home field advantage. However, there were advantages and disadvantages. Among Xianmen Tianzong's many strongholds in the vast thousand domains, Xiaoyan in the Netherworld Sea was the only place that the heaven-crushing sword could not take care of. Of course, in the Netherworld Sea, Xiaoyan's strength was also far greater than when he was in the vast thousand domains. The Xiaoyan in this state looking at the world, those who can pose a threat to him are also limited. Especially among these experts, a considerable portion have entered the Spirit Sea. Although Xia Huang's and Blood River Daoist's evil souls have been destroyed, the king of the underworld still has Yan Xinghe's evil soul. Shi Tianhao said, "Back then, Yan Xinghe's evil soul and the king of the underworld were heavily injured by Master. However, according to Master, second senior brother, and third senior brother's deductions, the other party seems to have recovered." The ritual that the king of the underworld used to recover his cultivation was scrapped twice before, and after the war between the two worlds. However, this old man is very good at hiding his strength. He has not made any movements over the years, and it is clear that he is biding his time and concentrating on accumulating his strength. No one knows if he has the ability to set up a third ritual, and no one knows to what extent his strength has recovered. Shi Tianhao said, "If it was Taishu Temple's Wu Mengqi or Shintizhe, it would be fine. However, if the king of the underworld and Yan Xinghe's evil soul enter the Netherworld Sea together, you will be under a lot of pressure, eldest senior brother." Xiaoyan smiled. "It's fine, I can handle it. If the other party communicates with the demon race, then the demon race will know about the situation in the divine land sooner or later. The ape race probed us first, which means that they have formed an alliance with the dragon race. Tenryugen most likely has not entered the spiritual sea yet, and wants to take advantage of the vast thousand domains first. A huge battle is inevitable. Although Aunt Xuanli is here, the other party will definitely try to maneuver. Therefore, it is better for you to stay in the vast thousand domains. He looked at Shi Tianhao and said slowly. However, Master once said that your grandfather will return during the battle of the spiritual sea. If he returns on his own, then so be it. I'm afraid that he will return like your parents back then. Shi Tianhao's eyes flashed with ferocity. He said, now that everything is unknown, let's not think about it. Xiaoyan said, in any case, I will leave the divine land to you. You don't have to be distracted here at the Netherworld Sea. Shi Tianhao nodded his head lightly. Eldest senior brother, be careful. Xiaoyan laughed loudly. Let's see who will come to die this time. Hearing this, Shi Tianhao also laughed loudly. Slowly, the crack in the Netherworld Sea closed, and Xiaoyan's figure disappeared among the layers of calamities. Just continue to defend Yan Emperor City. After bidding farewell to Xiaoyan, Shi Tianhao landed in Yan Emperor City. Looking at Lin Tong, Long Shenke, and Lu Yuan, he said, the other party invaded Yan Emperor City to test our strength. Although the reason is unknown, it seems that they have achieved their goal. From now on, they will most likely not invade our cave abode again. But just in case, you all should stay here. Hearing Shi Tianhao's instructions, Lin Tong and the others nodded in agreement. After the test just now achieved the expected goal, after the real battle, facing the situation that the heaven-punishing sword was destined to not enter the spiritual sea, without sufficient confidence, no great demon would fight to the death with the celestial sect of wonders. The real targets of the demon race were the Shushan sword sect, the Qin dynasty, and other factions. Moreover, the main battlefield of the demon race's chaos would definitely be the divine land. Although Infinite Wasteland was the world of the demon race, in the middle of the battle, the top declining great demons would not care at all. Great sages of the demon race like Yu Cheng and Great Spirit Sage, who had merged their star souls into one, might not attack. With the decisive victory in the divine land, the territories that Shushan, Great Qin, and other factions had occupied in Infinite Wasteland would naturally fall by themselves. The same logic applied to Yan Emperor City and other places. Even if the enemy wanted to attack Xianmen Tianzong, their targets would be Yujing Mountain and Ing Ocean, which were the real key areas. Because the Mystic Sky treasure trees had fully returned, Yujing Mountain remained hidden in the void even though Lin Feng was not there. Ing Ocean, on the other hand, might become the main target of the big demons. Although Ing Ocean was strong, it was still unknown how much power it could exert without Lin Feng's presence. Once they succeeded, they would undoubtedly gain the most. Ing Ocean, one of the 7 seas of Tianyuan, was coveted by everyone. In the consideration of Xiao Yan and the others, if the Emperor of the Underworld took the opportunity to cause trouble, it was very likely that he would create a diversion, and instead target the Ying Sea. This was also the direction they were on guard against. However, the first to feel the pressure from the demon race experts were undoubtedly the other sects and factions in the divine land. The Great Sage, Zhu Yan the Great Sage, Tianlong Kuan and Tianlong Shen. A total of 4 declining great demons passed through the domain passage at the same time and entered the divine land, bringing an omen of doomsday to the human cultivation world. The current ancient Emperor Gu Jun, who was in the southern border, could only temporarily retreat. The arrival of the top experts of the Dragon Tribe and the Ape Tribe also caused the Mount Shu Sword sect in the western Shu land, and the Qin dynasty in the north to feel great pressure. At the moment, the only thing that could make them feel relatively safe was Xianli, who was sitting cross-legged in the sky above the wilderness at the intersection of the Great Zhou dynasty and the Great Qin dynasty, as if there was no one else around. However, on the other side at the domain passage above the East Sea that connected to Infinite Wasteland, there was also an aura that was more powerful than that of the Great Sage, Tianlong Kuan, and the other great demons. The entire divine land seemed to be facing a cruel winter at this moment. Chapter 1402. As soon as Shi Tianhao returned to the Divine Land, he received messages from the other powers. He didn't have to ask to know that the shocking demonic aura at the entrance of the realm passage connecting the East Sea to Infinite Wasteland most likely belonged to the current master of the dragon race, the great demon who was going through the calamity period, Yuan Dragon King. In the past, before the Yudu race had returned, when King Yuan Dragon was still in the Dharma-ending realm, he was already known as the strongest great demon of the Dharma-ending realm. Other than the monkey, who was hard to find after the Middle Era, the other great demons of the Dharma-ending realm, including the Kunlun Dragon King, the master of the ape race, and the great sage of overreaching heaven, all agreed that King Yuan Dragon was the strongest demon of the Dharma-ending realm in the boundless world after the war between the two worlds ended 4,000 years ago. Before that, the dragon race spent most of their time cultivating in the Xian Sea. As the master of the dragon race, Yuan Dragon King blocked the news and successfully went through the calamity period. If it wasn't for Lin Feng stirring up a storm in Infinite Wasteland after the Battle of Mount Shu, the people of the Great Heaven primordial world wouldn't have known that Yuan Dragon King had successfully improved. When the war between the two worlds broke out, he unexpectedly recovered from his weakened state in advance. Unfortunately, just like the Yudu race that had returned to the boundless world, Yuan Dragon King met Lin Feng head-on. The Heaven Punishment Sword's second seal was successful, and it was unsealed. Lin Feng said that as long as he was in the boundless world, Yuan Dragon King wasn't allowed to leave the Xian Sea. Otherwise he would kill him. To the proud dragon race, this was undoubtedly a great humiliation, but Yuan Dragon King could only endure it. Today the master of the Xian Sea, the king of the dragon race, finally stepped into the boundless world again. However, Yuan Dragon King didn't feel proud at all. This was because the master of the Xian Gate, Lin Feng, had left the boundless world and gone to the Spirit Sea. To some extent, this made Yuan Dragon King feel even more humiliated. However, he didn't advance rashly. He didn't even enter the Divine Land through the Realm Passage. Instead, he stayed in Infinite Wasteland. Although Lin Feng himself had left the vast thousand domains and headed for the Spirit Sea, the terrifying heaven-punishing sword that struck fear into the hearts of all the demon clans was still hanging high above the Divine Land. However, the Yuan Dragon King's demonic energy was still faintly discernible. It passed through the passageway between the two worlds and shook the Divine Land. At this moment, the East Sea was filled with strong winds and strong waves. Torrential rain was falling, and tsunamis were breaking out continuously. Even though they were separated by a world, the might of the Yuan Dragon King still shocked the human cultivation world in the Divine Land. In the vast land of the Divine Prefecture, at the border between the Great Zhou and the Great Qin, Xianli sat in the void above the wilderness. Her face was expressionless as she looked in the direction of the East Sea, her eyes cold and emotionless. She, who had been sitting motionlessly all this time, finally stood up and walked in the void. She crossed the territory of the Great Zhou dynasty and arrived above the Eastern Sea. When Xianli crossed the coast and arrived at the surface of the East Sea, the storm immediately subsided. There seemed to be an invisible boundary on the surface of the sea. Behind Xianli, the wind and waves were calm, but in front of her, there was a storm and huge waves. However, as Xianli moved forward, the wind and rain in front of her kept receding. The roaring sea also returned to its calm state, and the moving crust and volcanoes at the bottom of the sea also calmed down. At the other end of the passageway between the two worlds above the Eastern Sea, the Yuan Dragon King's aura became even more ethereal, as if he was about to disappear. However, the Yuan Dragon King didn't really leave. He was also paying attention to Xianli's movements. The location that the Yuan Dragon King chose was also quite thought-provoking. The entrance to the Ying Sea that was controlled by Xianmen Tianzong was also above the Eastern Sea. If there was no one to stop him, he would probably directly enter the Ying Sea and cause a scene. With his strength and Lin Feng's absence, there were others guarding the Ying Sea. If the Yuan Dragon King barged in, no one would be able to take it lightly. The leader of the Dragon Clan restrained his arrogance when facing the sharpness of the heaven-punishing sword. The main purpose of his trip was to use himself as bait to restrain Xianli and create an opportunity for the Kuan Dragon King and the Shen Dragon King. In this battle, the top experts of the dragon clan all left the Xianxi and came to the colossal world. If Xianli gave up on him to fight the Kuan Dragon King and the others, the Yuan Dragon King wouldn't mind attacking the divine land instead. His destructive power was something that the human cultivators couldn't ignore. However, the Yuan Dragon King was also very afraid of Xianli, so he didn't dare to go too far. If Xianli took the initiative to attack and focused on killing him, the Yuan Dragon King would simply retreat or even return to the Xianxi. As soon as he felt Xianli's sword will, he immediately retreated. If he really came face to face with her, it would be extremely difficult for him to retreat safely even with the Xianxi ritual. He didn't want to end the battle with Xianli in a short period of time. That would give Xianli a chance to return and deal with the Kuan Dragon King and the others. Although he was humiliated because of Lin Feng, to the Yuan Dragon King, the existence that he hated the most was still the immortal dragon city of the Qin dynasty. The immortal dragon city of the past was now Shixingyun. It wasn't just the Yuan Dragon King's personal honor, but the shame of the entire dragon tribe. This time, the elites of the dragon tribe had come out in full force. Their main goal was to kill Shixingyun and destroy the Qin dynasty. Shi Tianhao knew what the Yuan Dragon King was thinking when he heard the Yuan Dragon King's plan. He gritted his teeth and said, "This is because of the Xianxi ritual. He and the Kuan and Shen dragons can return to the Xianxi at any time. Otherwise, I would have taken drastic measures against you. You keep an eye on the Yingxi of our sect, and Master Shi Tianhao will go to the Xianxi of the dragon tribe. I want to see how much the Xianxi of the dragon tribe, who has achieved the unification of the stars and souls, can activate, and see if they can stop me." Shi Tianhao let out a long sigh and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Bad news came one after another. The 4 great demons of the age of cultivation declining, which belonged to the dragon tribe and the ape tribe, did not split up to find their own enemies. Instead, they rushed to Mount Shu together. 4 great demons in the Dharma-ending realm attacked the Mount Shu sword sect together. The hearts of the human cultivators, including the higher-ups of the Great Qin dynasty, sank when they heard the news. Emperor Shi Zongtang and the others did not feel relieved at all. Instead, they felt even more depressed. Because this meant that the dragon tribe and the primordial demon ape tribe had really formed an alliance this time. It was not just a simple cooperation, but an alliance of advancing and retreating together. They chose to attack the Mount Shu sword sect first because it was closer to the divine land than to the West Hill city. The 4 demons of the cultivation declining stage joined forces with a large number of demon cultivators under their command. They formed a terrifying wave, intending to flatten Mount Shu first, and then the West Hill city. The Kuan Dragon King and the Shen Dragon King were not worried that the Great Sage and the Great Sage Zhu Yan would just leave after the attack on Mount Shu, because both they and the ape tribe had to rely on the Yuan Dragon King to contain Xianli. The Yuan Dragon King, who came out of the Xianxi during the Middle Tribulation, was the foundation and guarantee of the alliance. Once the 2 powerful demon tribes joined forces, the situation would be more favorable for them when the war officially started. They would attack the Mount Shu sword sect and the West Hill city respectively. No matter how the human cultivators were divided or how they would reinforce, the dragon tribe and the ape tribe would have to face the 2 major forces of the human cultivation world separately. Now that the demon tribes had joined forces, even if all the cultivators of the Great Qin dynasty were mobilized to reinforce the Mount Shu sword sect with all the cultivators of the human tribe, the geographical advantage of the West Hill city would not be of any use. Sometimes, the balance of victory and defeat was only a matter of a single line. If a decisive change happened in one corner of the war, it could affect other aspects and ultimately determine the direction of the whole situation. Shi Tianhao crushed a voice crystal. "Sister Xingyun, the situation has changed. I'm afraid you'll have to go to Mount Shu with us." At this moment, Gu Jun had already taken the longevity lotus throne to West Shu. Compared to Xianmen Tianzong, Taishu Temple, Mount Shu sword sect, and the Great Qin dynasty, the ancient emperor's bloodline, which had not appeared in the world for many years, did not have a deep conflict with the demon tribes. It was all left over from the ancient times, but Gu Jun still went to Mount Shu sword sect without hesitation. Xianmen Tianzong and the top cultivators of Taishu Temple had all gone to the spiritual sea. The divine land was empty, and the ancient dynasty had become one of the most important forces of the human cultivation world. At this critical moment, the ancient dynasty mobilized its forces and rushed to West Shu to tide over the calamity of the divine land. If Xianmen Tianzong, the ancient dynasty, and the other forces did not come to help, the Mount Shu sword sect would probably be crushed by the attacks of the four great demons of the age of cultivation. The same principle applied to the Great Qin dynasty. If they split their forces and were defeated one by one, the Kunlong King, the Great Sage, and the other demons would sweep across the divine land like a thunderbolt. An elegant voice came from the other side of Shi Tianhao's voice transmission. It was Shi Xingyun. Don't worry, Tianhao. I'm already on my way. Regardless of the outcome, it would be more beneficial for the Great Qin dynasty if they could end the battle in Mount Shu, as West Hill City would not be threatened. Therefore, not only Shi Xingyun, but the other high-level cultivators of the Great Qin dynasty were also heading to Mount Shu to help. Moreover, Shi Xingyun's relationship with Xianmen Tianzong and the others had become better over the years. In terms of bloodline, she and Shi Tianhao were distant relatives. However, Shi Tianhao had always addressed her politely in the past, just like how Shi Tianhao treated the Great Qin dynasty. At the moment, Shi Tianhao's impression of the Great Qin dynasty had not changed much. However, his relationship with Shi Xingyun had improved a lot in recent years. Since Shi Xingyun had been reborn, she had spent a lot of time cultivating in the desolate ancient Star Ocean through the Star Ocean Gate of Xianmen Tianzong, which had benefited her a lot. Even without the Great Qin dynasty, she would still go to Mount Shu at Shi Tianhao's invitation. For a while, the divine land was in turmoil, and the world was shaking. The Mount Shu sword sect, which had been sealed for many years, seemed to have gradually faded out of everyone's sight, except for a brief appearance during the war between the two worlds. At this moment, it became the focus of the divine land again. However, such an encounter was not something to be happy about for the people of the Mount Shu sword sect. This was especially so when the figures of the four great demons of the age of cultivation, the Great Sage, Kunlong King, Shin Dragon King, and Great Sage Zhu Yan, broke through the void and descended on Mount Shu together. The terrifying pressure made the world change color. Chapter 1403. The mountains of West Shu, which had been sunny just a moment ago, were now covered with dark clouds, and the sun could not be seen for thousands of miles. The entire Mount Shu sword sect was in a depressing atmosphere. When they received the news that the primordial demonic ape tribe was trying to attack Yin Emperor City, they already had a bad feeling. Just in case, the younger disciples with lower cultivation were sent to other places to avoid being affected by the war. But when the demon tribe really came, the terrible situation still made everyone's heart heavy. Other than Zhu Yan the Great Sage, Tong Tian the Great Sage also came along. What was worse was that apart from the two of them, Kunlun Dragon King and Shin Dragon King also came. Four great demons of the declining age attacked together. Even before the Battle of Mount Shu, when the Fairy Heaven Sword and the Great Immortal Nature Sword formation were still there, the Mount Shu sword sect would not be safe, not to mention the current situation. In the dark sky, the first thing that could be seen were four crimson flames. Wherever the flames passed, the void distorted and became chaotic. The shapeless void condensed into a flight of stairs that seemed to have substance. The four crimson flames fell on it, and the flames burned fiercely. A white jade-like luster appeared on the stairs, forming a huge body that looked like a white jade mountain. It was Great Saint Zhu Yan. Zhu Yan's red eyes flashed with cyan ferocity. He stared expressionlessly at the peaks of Mount Shu below. During the Middle Era, the cultivators of the Mount Shu sword sect plotted to seize the red refinement fire copper mine on Mount Xiaozi, but they were killed by the Great Saint Zhu Yan. Later, the sword ancestor, Ren Changmei, killed the Great Saint Zhu Yan as revenge. Later, the sword ancestor, Ren Changmei, was killed by the extreme Emperor Divine Abyss. At this point, the hatred between the two sides did not end. Instead, it continued. From the Middle Era to the present, the Zhu Yan demonic ape tribe and the Mount Shu sword sect had fought with each other from time to time. Clansmen and cultivators of different cultivation levels were killed or injured. and the hatred grew deeper and deeper. The Zhuyan demonic ape tribe had always been one of the strongest among the primordial demonic ape tribe. After a long time of development, the entire tribe had not been on good terms with the Mount Shu sword sect. At this moment, there was no anger or hatred in Zhu Yan's eyes. There was only indifference and coldness, revealing an even more terrifying will to exterminate. On the other side of the sky, the thick black fog billowed, and an existence even more terrifying than the great Saint Zhu Yan emerged. Black smoke billowed from the huge, pitch-black body. He did not make any gestures, but he seemed to have the power to pierce through the heavens and the earth. His scarlet eyes stared coldly at Shushan. It was the current leader of the ape race, the Great Sage. In front of the Great Sage, the dark clouds and black fog that filled the sky suddenly dispersed. Golden light shone, dispelling the darkness, and a powerful majesty was revealed. 2 clouds of golden dragon might appeared. One was dignified and domineering, while the other was vigorous and heavy. Both of them exuded the majestic aura of the primordial heavenly dragon, suppressing the surroundings. It made all living beings involuntarily have the thought of prostrating themselves in worship, nearly submitting without fighting. The golden light and the black fog each occupied half of the sky, but they did not confront each other. Instead, they jointly formed a domain-like existence, shrouding the mountains of West Shu, almost isolating it from the world. Within each of the 2 balls of golden auspicious clouds, an enormous heavenly dragon of unknown length could be faintly seen floating and swimming within the clouds. The golden scales on their bodies were dazzling and resplendent, and they illuminated the heavens and the earth. But under the concealment of the auspicious clouds, it was difficult to discern their true forms, and the head of the dragons could be seen but not their tails. Everyone knew that they were the 2 experts of the Dharma-ending period of the dragon race, the Kunlun Dragon King and the Shin Dragon King. For great demons of the Dharma-ending period had descended on Shushan. Just the gathering of the demonic aura made Shushan feel like it was in a storm. After the successive battle of Shushan and the War of the 2 Realms, Shushan's sword sect had suffered a great disaster. The current Mountain Gate Cave was rebuilt again after the War of the 2 Realms. There was no time for the sword chi and sword will to accumulate. At this moment, under the pressure of the demonic aura of Zhu Yan and the other great demons, the mountain even began to gradually crack, as if it was about to collapse. The newly set up mountain guarding formation had already been activated, turning into beams of sword chi and soaring into the sky. But it looked like a lonely boat in the raging waves. At this time, on the top of the main peak of Shushan, bright sword light suddenly rose, and the sound of swords shook the sky. The sword light, like stars, rose slowly from the top of the mountain, bright and dazzling. After the first star, more and more sword stars rose, turning into a distant river of stars, rushing into the sky. The tall figure of the Big Dipper swordsman stood on the top of Shushan, looking calm and resolute. Silently, he looked at the demon experts who were pressing down on the border. Without saying a word, he waved his hand, and the Big Dipper ancient sword fell into his palm. With the tip of the sword, the heavenly river formed by the sword light crossed in front of him, and the sword will and sword will pointed at Zhu Yan and the great sage. Although the enemy before him was powerful enough to destroy the current Shushan sword sect with ease, Big Dipper swordsman had no intention of retreating. 1 man, 1 sword, 1 battle. Behind him, the current sect master of the Shushan sword sect, Jiwenrui, was sitting cross-legged, surrounded by Jiwenrui. At present, the sword masters and grandmasters of the various sword branches of Shushan were also sitting on the ground. Everyone was performing sword incantations and activating their sword will to strengthen the mountain gate formation. Without the sword formation of the great immortal heaven and the sword formation of primordial beginning, there was almost no room for them to intervene in the current battle. But Jiwenrui and the others still tried their best to activate their sword will to strengthen the sword formation, and then guided the power of the sword formation to Big Dipper swordsman. Both the great sage and Zhu Yan looked at Big Dipper swordsman coldly. On the other side, the voice of the Kuan Dragon King came from the golden dragon auspicious cloud. Finish this quickly. Before his voice trailed off, Zhu Yan's huge body had already pressed down on the sky above Shushan. He let out a low growl and directly revealed his true form. The space where Shu Shan was suddenly began to distort violently. Layers of space barriers enveloped the mountains of Western Shu and Big Dipper swordsmen. As Zhu Yan trampled the void with his 4 claws, the overlapping space began to compress toward the center. It was as if this part of the world had become an ink painting, and then it was being forcefully rubbed by someone from the outside world. Everything was distorted and broken. The great sage also reached out his claw and clenched it into a fist, then smashed it down on Big Dipper swordsman's head. As the fist smashed down, the sky above Shushan seemed to collapse. The Kuan Dragon King and Shin Dragon King were not idle either. Their huge dragon heads peeked out from the golden auspicious cloud, looking down at the Shushan sword sect with dignity and indifference. Shin Dragon King's eyes flashed slightly. He suddenly retracted his dragon head into the golden dragon auspicious cloud, and floated in the opposite direction. The expressions of the Kuan Dragon King, the Great Sage, and Zhu Yan Great Sage didn't change at all. In the void far away, an elegant white lotus suddenly appeared. Dense waves of spiritual qi spread out, vast and endless. On the center of the white lotus sat a majestic emperor. He wore a dragon robe and a crown on his head. He was the current ancient emperor, Gujun. He merged with the longevity lotus beneath him, manifesting rays of spiritual light that illuminated the world. In the light, many white lotuses rose up and down, and the distant celestial music lingered, making the whole world seem like a paradise of longevity, an ideal hometown, and people couldn't help but want to be immersed in it. The endless paradise seemed to be eternal and auspicious, not falling into the mundane world, and it made people's hearts tremble. The white spiritual light collided with the golden dragon auspicious cloud around Shin Dragon King. The white spiritual light rippled like water and shattered, and the golden auspicious cloud also dissipated. Gu Jun sat on the longevity lotus and formed a seal with both of his hands. The longevity lotus shone brightly, and the white spiritual light condensed, turning into an even bigger lotus platform with 18 giant petals. At the same time, the scene in the sky became more and more brilliant. White lotuses fell from the sky and floated along with the clear air. Countless white lotuses suddenly turned into a sea of lotuses, enveloping Shin Dragon King. As the golden light around him shone, it was blocked by the white lotuses. One white lotus disappeared and 2 rose as if there was no end. Shin Dragon King looked up and saw Gujun, and the giant white lotus floating in the middle of the sea of flowers like a lone island in the sea. But when he wanted to get closer to Gujun and the longevity lotus, he realized that there were many white lotuses rising in front of him, and they became denser and denser. Gujun and the longevity lotus disappeared in the sea of flowers, and were covered by billions of white lotuses. Although this was the first time Shin Dragon King fought with Gujun using the Tao of the ancient emperor, in the ancient era, the ancestors of the dragon race had fought with the ancient emperor, who ruled the world in the ancient era, so they had some understanding of the primordial Tao of longevity. He knew that the method Gujun and the longevity lotus used together was similar to the Buddhist kingdom in the Palm Grand Divine Power of the Buddhist sect. The white lotuses in front of him were completely different from the Buddhist Adumbra flower in the Buddhist sect, but they both had the essence of the flower blooming. If he couldn't break the sea of flowers, Shin Dragon King wouldn't be able to escape, let alone hurt Gujun and the longevity lotus. His strength is definitely not as good as Gu Chongqing in the ancient era, but why do I feel that his method is more exquisite than the rumors? Is it because Gu Chongqing's descendants have surpassed him? Or is the rumor true? Is the master of the Celestial Gate giving a speech and secretly helping us? Although he was temporarily trapped, Shin Dragon King didn't panic at all. Regardless of the outcome, he was confident that he could break the method in front of him. However, he had many doubts in his mind. The more he thought about it, the more he felt his blood run cold. Shin Dragon King was even less worried about the situation on Mount Shu. Without the Celestial Heaven Sword and the geographical advantage, no matter how unyielding the Tiangang Sword Venerable was, he wouldn't be able to withstand the attacks of the 3 grand demons of the Age of Cultivation, the Great Sage, Kunlong King, and Zhu Yan. At this moment, on Mount Shu, Kunlong King looked down at the mountain coldly. He didn't attack with the Great Sage and Zhu Yan. But even so, the dazzling sword-light galaxy above the main peak of Mount Shu, was on the verge of collapse at this moment. While resisting the attack of Zhuyan Great Saint, it was no longer able to take care of the omnipotent sage. The sword-light was smashed into pieces by the omnipotent sage's punch. However, right at that moment, the omnipotent saint and the Kunlong King frowned slightly and looked up. In the sky above Mount Shu, a crack suddenly appeared, and a strong light shot down from it. Chapter 1404. Above Mount Shu, the vault of heaven opened, and dazzling light shone down, falling directly on the main peak of Mount Shu like a heavenly pillar, piercing the sky and the earth. It was clearly a sword light, dazzling and breathtaking. The sword will in it was not very sharp, but there seemed to be a large number of lights and shadows in the sword light, as if there was a world. Everyone looked up and saw the opening in the vault of heaven, the light surging. Looking inside, the layers of light and shadows became clearer. There seemed to be a reflection of the boundless world in it, facing the real divine land below. A figure walked out of the light. He was dressed in cyan and had ordinary features, but his eyes were shining and as sharp as a sword. Ji Wenrui and the others saw this scene, and they were all excited. The newcomer was the former sect leader of Mount Shu Sword Sect, Xian Longsheng, who had been traveling far away, missing and rarely heard from. The heavenly reaching great sage, and the great sage of Zhu Yin looked at Xian Longsheng coldly. To them, Xian Longsheng was just a junior. During the Battle of Shushan, he had just experienced the first tribulation. At this moment, Xian Longsheng's strength was higher than before, but decades were not enough for him to completely pass the first tribulation and enter the Dharma-ending realm. But the sword will around Xian Longsheng was bursting, showing a strange aura that the great sage and Zhu Yan, who had dealt with many times with the Mount Shu sword sect, felt strange. It seemed to be the same as the celestial sword chi of Mount Shu, but the great sage and Zhu Yan could clearly distinguish the difference between them. It seemed to be a new kind of swordsmanship, different from the sword will that Xian Longsheng had cultivated all his life. Swordsmanship could be practiced at the same time, but the swordsmanship of achieving the way and the method of proving the primordial spirit were not so easy to change, especially for someone with Xian Longsheng's cultivation. It was almost impossible to start all over again. Even if he could, it would mean that his previous years of hard work would go down the drain, and he would have to start all over again. How could it be achieved in just over 20 years in the mortal world? Ji Wenrui and the others from the Shushan sword sect knew more about this. Even when Xian Longsheng had returned to the sect, he was still at the bottom of the heavenly immortal sword chi. At that time, although there had been some changes, they had only been vague thoughts. It was not like now, where he had been reborn. What made Ji Wenrui and the others even more excited was that the item that Xian Longsheng had secretly taken away had returned to Shushan with him today, and was similarly reborn. What concerned the great sage Zhu Yan and Kunlong King the most was Xian Longsheng's right hand. At this moment, Xian Longsheng's right hand clearly held a long sword. Its entire body was like jade, and the edge of the sword was not sharp, but it seemed to be able to cut through the heavens and earth. With the sword in hand, Xian Longsheng felt like he was holding a world of creation. However, it was still a broken sword. The tip of the sword was neat, and the fracture was smooth. This broken white jade sword was clearly the first sword of the heavenly origin realm, the treasure of Shushan Town, the immortal heaven sword. At this moment, the immortal heaven sword looked like it had not recovered its original appearance, but the power and intent realm within it attracted the attention of everyone present. The magnificent power and intent realm that could split the heavens and the earth affected the surroundings, shaking the real divine land of the vast thousand worlds. The sword chi extended along the sky in all directions, and the whole world seemed to have become a giant sword that could split the heavens at this moment. At the fracture of the immortal heaven sword, there was a colorless stream of light that kept flowing and turning into an invisible sharpness. This stream of light became a part of the blade, and became the sharpest existence on the entire immortal heaven sword. Wherever the blade reached, the tip of the sword seemed to be indestructible, able to break through everything that stood in its way. Even if it was the creation of chaos, it could still be pierced by the sword and split the heavens and the earth. Although it was an invisible blade, it was even sharper than the visible white jade sword. It attracted the sword intent of the vast thousand worlds, and the sword intent and sword chi of the immortal heaven sword converged on the tip of the sword, making it look extremely terrifying. At this moment, the sharpness of the sword in Xian Longxing's hand was no less than the immortal heaven sword of the past, but it was not the reincarnation of the Emperor of Swords of the immortal heaven sword. Inside the sword formed by the invisible stream of light, there were many different phenomena. Compared to the immortal heaven sword of the past, there were many more possibilities. The great Tao moved forward together, indicating the possibility of advancing further. Xian Longxing raised the sword, and as the blade rose, the thousands of swords in the divine land began to vibrate at this moment. Endless sword chi and sword chi began to gather toward Shu Mountain, and the sword in Xian Longxing's hand. These sword chi were not absorbed by the sword in Xian Longxing's hand. Instead, under the guidance of the invisible sword at the tip of the sword, they rose together. With the invisible sword as the core, they supported each other, and became stronger and stronger. Thousands of sword chi gathered and formed a great intent that could split the heavens and the earth. It cut through all obstacles and broke through all obstacles. Above Shu Mountain, the sword chi and sword chi of all the swordsmen of Shu Mountain, including the Big Dipper sword Venerable, also rose together with the invisible sword. They went forward together to meet the group of grand demons in front of them. Xian Longxing said, "The immortal heaven will face the tribulation, and creation will be destroyed. Today we will break the chaos and open the world again. This sword is called Sky Splitting." Xian Longxing's voice was like a great bell, shaking the void. At this moment, it resounded throughout the land of West Shu and spread far above the vast divine land. Above the divine land, in the mountain gates of the Heavenly Sword Sect, the Thunderbolt Sword Sect, the Celestial Sword Sect, the Songhai Sword Sect, the Wilderness Sword Sect, and other sword sects, the leaders of the Heavenly Sword Sect, such as the Thunderbolt Sword Sect, the Celestial Sword Sect, and the Wilderness Sword Sect, were also looking in the direction of Shu Mountain. Seeing that the sword chi and sword chi of the world once again gathered at Shu Mountain, the Heavenly Sword Venerable and the others did not surrender this time, but they did not show any hostility or dissatisfaction. Instead, they fell into silence and looked at Shu Mountain with complicated expressions. The invisible sword at the top of the sky-splitting sword in Xian Longxing's hand kept spinning. At this moment, the entire boundless world seemed to have turned into a boundless blade, pointing at the invading the Great Sage Zhu Yan and Kunlong King. He, Shu Mountain, and Big Dipper Sword Venerable on the mountain. The sword chi and sword will were one at this moment. With Shu Mountain as the core, it seemed that the whole body had turned into a sword blade. Then it drew the boundless spiritual chi of the world and turned it into its own sword edge, slashing toward the Great Sage and the other grand demons. The Great Sage and Great Sage Zhu Yan both frowned slightly. Great Sage Zhu Yan looked at Xian Longxing and said, "At the same level of cultivation, you are better than your master and Big Dipper. Your Shu Mountain was defeated by the sword of the Xianmen sect master, but you rose from the ashes. Good. Very good." His eyes finally fell on the sky-splitting sword, and his voice was cold. "I regret not being able to destroy your Shu Mountain immortal celestial sword with my own hands. Fortunately, today, I have the opportunity to destroy the hope of your Shu Mountain's revival. I have knocked you down from the clouds twice, and I think it will make you collapse and despair." Great Sage Zhu Yan looked up to the sky and roared, "In this way, I can't be happier." In the roar, Great Sage Zhu Yan, who had been standing in the void with his 4 feet, stood up at this moment. The crimson flames on his 2 front claws suddenly turned green. In the green flames, there were even specks of starlight emerging. One after another, stars rose and fell in the green demonic fire. The fire and the starlight merged into one, causing the nearby time and space to distort and fracture. His 2 giant claws put their 10 fingers together, crossed their fists, and then smashed toward Xian Longxing and Big Dipper Sword Venerable together. With this smash, the green demonic fire exploded. The whole world where Shu Mountain was suddenly like a broken porcelain, full of cracks, and then shattered, turning into a pitch-black void. At this moment, Great Sage Zhu Yan struck with all his strength. The boundless world of the divine land was shaken, and the realm cracks also appeared at the same time. The movements of the people of Shu Mountain who were in this world seemed to collectively freeze for a moment. It was not that they didn't want to move, but this blow from Great Sage Zhu Yan had frozen the entire time in an instant, so that the other side could not respond or escape. At this moment, they were completely destroyed. But in this instant, the eyeballs of Xian Longsheng and Big Dipper Sword Venerable moved at the same time, and the invisible sword edge at the top of the sky-opening sword also flowed with brilliance. Next, they saw a sword slash down, and the frozen time and space began to move again at this moment, and everything became alive again. Wherever the sword light passed, it seemed to open up a new world for the human world, so that the scene of the collapse of the doomsday no longer existed. The rolling sword light cut through the thistles and thorns, invincible. It split the void, split the demon aura, split the green demonic fire, and went all the way to Great Sage Zhu Yan. At the source of the sword light, above Shu Mountain, a figure seemed to appear in the void. It was an old man in linen with a white beard and white hair. When Great Sage Zhu Yan saw him, he let out a shocking roar. Ren Changmei. The old man in linen was the founder of the Shu Mountain Sword Sect. A giant of the divine land, sword ancestor Ren Changmei. The old man held a long sword in his hand and stabbed it out. It seemed that the world was being split open, and the sword momentum did not stop. It rolled forward and covered the divine land. Later, the sword momentum went round and round, becoming perfect. But at this moment, the light and shadow of the old man in linen suddenly broke, and a new sword light rushed out, as if cutting the world and opening up the world again. And this sword had the same wonderful effect as the old man's first sword move. This sword both destroyed and built, carried on the past and opened up the future, but also returned to the origin and set things right. The beginning and end of the great path was mysterious. Seeing this scene, the great sage snorted slightly and gritted his teeth. His violent chi and blood and demonic power vibrated together, and his body kept expanding, becoming bigger and bigger, and began to show his original real body. The huge black body, like a demon god, and the two blood-red star-like eyes stared coldly at Xian Longsheng, Celestial Gang Sword Venerable, and the sky-opening sword. The majestic power of tearing the void of heaven and earth was revealed with every move, more violent and overbearing than Great Sage Zhu Yan. He suddenly took a step forward, stood in front of Great Sage Zhu Yan, and smashed his fists toward the peaks of Shu Mountain. Even if the great sage did not block or avoid the sharp sword light that could split heaven and earth, he would not be able to get away with it. But at this moment, in the face of the sword light of the sky-opening sword that was stabbing him, the great sage seemed to completely ignore it. If you stab me with your sword, I will smash your entire Shu Mountain. On the main peak of Shu Mountain, Xian Longsheng had already landed on the top of the mountain, standing side by side with Celestial Gang Sword Venerable. Ji Wenrui and other Shu Mountain cultivators also stood up and stood behind them. As the tip of the sky-opening sword guided them, all the Shu Mountain cultivators struck their swords together. The sword light continued to move forward in a straight and fearless manner, unwavering, and attacked the great sage. Chapter 1405. The violent power of the great sage smashed down. The world where the peaks of Shushan were did not collapse directly. Instead, it seemed to be separated from the divine land of the boundless world, and then it shrank infinitely, collapsing towards a single point. The vast sword light was even more sharp and ferocious. It cut through the extremely powerful demon body of the great sage after he revealed his true form, and a large amount of demon blood permeated the void. The peaks of Shushan collapsed, and everyone on the mountain also staggered. Their bodies shook violently and their auras dimmed. Xian Longsheng's face was as pale as paper. His body swayed, and his primordial spirit barely maintained its human form. However, the hand holding the heaven-opening sword did not waver at all, and the blade was still pointing forward. After today, Shushan will either be completely destroyed or reborn. Life and death will only depend on this battle. The rolling sword light, at this moment, was endless. It continued forward without the slightest hesitation or retreat, and still pierced into the body of the great sage. In the body of this great demon, there seemed to be layers of cosmic light and shadow undulating, and then being destroyed by the sword light. The true blood of the great demon was extremely condensed. When the blood fell, it was like a meteor shower hitting the ground. A drop of true blood became like a star, and it was extremely terrifying. The great sage's blood-red eyes, which were like two stars, seemed to have substance, and his gaze fell on Xian Longsheng, Sword Venerable Tiangang, and the others. He opened his bloody mouth, which seemed to be able to swallow the sun and the moon, and grinned, looking extremely ferocious. The two huge claws suddenly retracted and closed in the middle, clamping the sword light of the heaven-opening sword. The violent power distorted time and space, making the invisible sword light seem to have a tangible quality. The magnificent will of the heaven-opening sword was gradually worn down and imprisoned. The mysterious sword will also seem to have lost its previous profoundness, and was pressed between the two claws of the great sage. The black demonic mist around the body of the great sage kept rising, and there was even a black brilliance flowing in it. It was as thick as ink, and the sword light could not continue moving forward. The sword chi of heaven and earth and the boundless universe sword will, which were attracted by the heaven-opening sword, also showed signs of dissipating, as if they were gradually returning to calmness. It was just that it was not easy for the great sage to fight against the ferocious sword creation magic treasure with his bare hands. At the same time that the giant claws of the Demon King stopped the sword light's momentum, wounds appeared on the palms and claws. The tip of the sword light was still deeply embedded in the great sage's right shoulder blade. Xian Longsheng and Sword Lord Heavenly Dipper's faces were a little pale. Their bodies swayed slightly like water ripples, as if their primordial spirits would lose their human form at any time. Quick! The two of them spoke in unison as a ball of light flickered in front of them. The ball of light in front of Sword Sovereign Astral Dipper was the convergence of countless immortal sword chi. Sword intent and sword light combined to form a resplendent sword star. Within the sword star, there seemed to be a long river of starlight flowing. Although Xian Longsheng had also condensed his own Dao fruit, it was different from the heavenly immortal sword Dao true fruit of the past. Instead, it was a blurry ball of light. Suddenly, a ray of sword energy shot out, breaking through the chaos. After the first ray of sword energy, millions of rays of sword energy appeared. The ball of light grew from nothing, and in an instant, tens of thousands of swords formed a world of swords. The two of them exerted their strength together, and the sword light of the sky-opening sword became bright again. The sword intent seemed to be innately good at opening up, unrestrained and capable of breaking through all obstacles and shackles. It was the exact opposite of what the great sage was doing to restrain the sword light at the moment. The sword light became brighter and brighter, and there was a roar from it, rolling like waves. The millions of swords in the boundless world of the divine land hummed again. Countless sword intent and sword chi were triggered by the sky-opening sword, and they once again swept toward the great sage. The great sage sneered, as if he didn't care at all. On the other side, great sage Zhuyan stepped into the void, and was already above Xian Longsheng and Sword Lord Heavenly Dipper. He also had a cold smile on his face, and then he stomped down on Xian Longsheng and Sword Lord Heavenly Dipper. Xian Longsheng's pupils contracted slightly. The sky-opening sword was restrained by the great sage, and it could not return to attack great sage Zhuyan. At the moment, they were fighting with all their might against the great sage, and they were completely powerless to resist great sage Zhuyan above them. Sword Lord Heavenly Dipper was silent as well. A cold light flashed in his eyes, and he anxiously tried to think of a way to deal with it. The great sage was focused on resisting the sharpness of the sky-opening sword, and they could not repel it in a short time. The threat of great sage Zhuyan had fallen from the sky, and was close at hand. At the moment, only Sword Lord Heavenly Dipper could resist great sage Zhuyan alone, temporarily delaying his attack, so that they could survive the current crisis. But after he left, Xian Longsheng drove the sky-opening sword alone, and the pressure on the great sage increased sharply. In the end, the result was still not optimistic. Sword will surged around Xian Longsheng and Sword Lord Heavenly Dipper, and their eyes became extremely resolute. They completely ignored the existence of great sage Juyan above them, and drove the sky-opening sword with all their might, continuing to attack the great sage. Instead of dying in vain, they would rather fight with their lives on the line and fight for the only chance in a flash. Even if great sage Juyan succeeded, they would still further damage the great sage. The great sage looked at the scene and said coldly, "The great immortal heaven of Shushan no longer exists, and today you have created a new sword of fortune. In time, you might be able to build another Dharma design that is not inferior to the great immortal heaven of Shushan's sword formation. At that time, you will more or less have the strength to fight. But it's a pity that you won't have a chance today." His body was filled with black mist, and his terrifying physical chi and blood spread out, merging with the black mist, making the area around his body seem to be a world of its own. Inside the black mist, the figure of the great sage seemed to suddenly disappear from the eyes of Sword Lord Heavenly Dipper and Xian Longsheng. They could not see him with their naked eyes, their spiritual consciousness, and their mind. They seemed to have lost track of the great sage as well. They slashed with their swords, but they had lost their target, as if they were about to miss. "Give up. If this goes on, we won't be able to damage the great sage, and we will be seriously injured by great sage Juyan instead. We won't have a chance to fight back later. If we return to the sword doppelganger to defend against great sage Juyan, we will be at a disadvantage later, but at least we have a chance to fight back. Even if we can't defeat the opponent, we can try our best to stall for time. Others will come to support us. At that time, we won't have to fear the demons in front of us at all. Retreating now is so that we can launch a counterattack later. It's not wise to fight with death." With the appearance of the sky-opening sword, Shushan finally has a chance to rise again. "If things really go wrong, I will protect Longsheng and the others and leave with the sky-opening sword, even if I have to sacrifice my life. As long as we survive today's disaster, Shushan will have a chance to rise again. Even if we can seriously injure the great sage now, we will also be seriously injured by great sage Juyan. Kunlun Dragon King is around, and we can't escape the fate of defeat in the end. Even if others come and kill all these big demons, Shushan will be completely destroyed." At this moment, countless thoughts emerged in the minds of Xian Longsheng and Sword Venerable Celestial Dipper, and then they killed all these thoughts as external demons that disturbed their minds. In the end, there was only pure determination left. Even Ji Wenrui and the others, who had been seriously injured, struggled to stand up at this moment. Although their magic power had dissipated, their sword will was still pure. The sword light that pierced into the thick black fog became brighter and more dazzling. Wherever the sword light went, the thick black fog was also divided. It was as if chaos was opening up, leading the tens of thousands of swords formed by the spiritual chi of heaven and earth to continue forward together. The figure of the great sage reappeared in the eyes of Xian Longsheng, Sword Venerable Celestial Dipper, and the others. The great sage showed a slightly stunned expression. At this moment, great sage Juyan came crashing down like a falling sky, reaching the heads of Xian Longsheng and Sword Venerable Celestial Dipper. The bounded domain between heaven and earth suddenly shook slightly. The void cracked, and two figures rushed out from it. One was a tall and handsome young man, and the other was an elegant and graceful woman in a yellow robe. They were Shi Tianhao and Shi Xingyun. Shi Tianhao glared at great sage Juyan and said, "You ran away from the vast land of infinite wasteland. What about now?" As he spoke, Shi Tianhao's figure shook and split into two in the void. He was the Yingyuan and the Desolate God. The 12 divine generals' spiritual bodies and the sky city appeared above each of their heads, and then they rushed toward great sage Juyan together. Almost in the blink of an eye, they were already in front of great sage Juyan. The body of the Desolate God threw a punch, and the 12 divine generals' spiritual bodies above his head also threw punches. On the other side, the 100 feet tall body of the Yingyuan suddenly put its palms together. Endless purple thunderbolts burst from its body, making it look like the god of thunder had descended to the world. Dense purple thunderbolts enveloped its entire body. At the same time, in the sky city above his body of the Yingyuan body, an invisible but extremely fierce and indestructible Tiangang divine wind was suddenly raised. Where the storm passed, The huge sky city also seemed to vanish into the void, as if it had disappeared without a trace. The endless nine heavens' divine thunder and the nine heavens' formless gale fused at this moment and helped each other, pushing each other to an unimaginable and seemingly infinite realm. Although the power that kept growing seemed very powerful at first, it was not enough for the great sage Juyen, and the others to pay too much attention to it. However, the potential hidden within and the terrifying speed of growth made even the great demon age of the Age of Decline frown. Almost in the blink of an eye, the raging and endless power of wind and thunder had increased rapidly, and it was still increasing. A deafening dragon roar sounded. The Kunlun Dragon King stood in front of Shi Tianhao, intending to block the attack for Great Sage Juyen. However, his huge body paused for a moment. In the void far away, a misty brilliance shrouded a golden heavenly dragon that was even larger than the Kunlun Dragon King. It was majestic and awe-inspiring, as if it was the origin of all things. It hovered in the void, not only filling up the space between heaven and earth, but it also gave people a wonderful feeling that its body had embraced heaven and earth. Shi Xingyun, who was dressed in a light yellow dress, was sitting on the dragon's head. The giant dragon reached out its claws, and the space where the Kunlun Dragon King was suddenly slowed down and turned pale. The void was a blur of chaos, and everything seemed to be shrouded in a grayish-white world. Time stopped flowing, but it also seemed to be changing all the time, as if an instant was an eternity. The Kunlun Dragon King flew into a rage. "You brought yourself to me." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.